All right, this meeting is being held in compliance with the Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the Coaster and Asbury Park Press by publication of the annual meeting notice and posted on the municipal bulletin board and municipal website. All notices are on file with the board secretary. Official action may be taken to the following matters before this board. Fire exits are located on the east and west sides of the council chambers, as well as the back of the building. I will ask everyone with cell phone or other device to kindly silence your device for the duration of this meeting. This meeting is being recorded by APTV for your future viewing pleasure. Please join me with a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone. Today is Monday, September 13th, 2021. I will now take roll. Mayor John Moore.
Here.
Councilwoman Yvonne Clayton is absent. Michael Manzella.
Here.
Jim Henry.
Here.
Jennifer Sauter. Here. Alexis Taylor is absent. Eric Elko.
Here.
Rick Lambert is absent. And Robert Kurzak.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And
Okay, the first item up we have are the minutes of the August 9th, 2021 regular meeting. The only modification that I'd like to ask for is that on the first page where we had mentioned about the 72 bikes in storage area, I know that we had a discussion about 72 plus 60, which is 132. So if we can make that adjustment. I had that according to my notes.
yes.
But otherwise, does anybody else have anything else that they would like to make modifications to for the minutes? No? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve as modified.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Jim Henry and a second by Michael Manzella. Everyone is eligible to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes memorialized for August 9th, 2021.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a resolution of approval for the AP Block 4001 Venture Urban Renewal LLC. I have a request, Jack, to modify item number 15, where it says the applicant must offer the electric vehicle charging stations. I'm requesting that it says the applicant must provide as opposed to offer because they are rentals.
I have that.
Not.
I
Okay.
have it in my written notes. I
Okay.
have a couple of others also.
Go ahead.
Okay. On page 1, line 2, Ms. Smith was talking to me. It said, should read the second line, hereinafter referred to as the applicant is the owner. That's incorrect. The applicant is the designated subsequent developer. So we're going to insert designated subsequent developer in lieu of owner.
Jack, while we're on that location, are the block and lots right in that first whereas? Because the title,
I took them, I'll check them with Irina tomorrow. I took them off of, I'm not sure if it was the report or,
okay, because in the title it says it has two different blocks.
oh, okay, okay, it should be just block
4001 lots 2 through
I'm
15.
sorry.
Yeah.
And lots 2 through 15, we'll
Yeah.
correct that as well. Thank you.
Yep.
Is that the header?
Yes.
Yeah, the title.
Block 4001, lots 2 through 15.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. On page 3, number 3, it should read, any encroachments into any city ROW, which is right of way, must be approved by the mayor and council. And we're going to insert in accordance with the redeveloper's agreement prior to commencement of any construction. So it's got to track with that. On page 4, number 8 in red, just going to make that the applicant shall comply with the outstanding conditions set forth, et cetera, and of course change red ink to black. So the blank is going to have the word outstanding. And 15, we'll omit offer, and put in provide electric vehicle charging. Other than that, I have no other amendments to offer.
Does anybody else have any modifications that they would like to, are concerned about? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
Move to approve as modified.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Manzella, okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Michael Manzella and a second by Robert Herzog. I'm just going to take roll for this. Mr. Henry is recused. Mayor John Lawrence.
Yes.
Michael Manzella.
Yes.
Jennifer Sauter.
Yes.
Eric Galco.
Yes.
And Robert Herzog.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Okay, we have the application that we have up for discussion is 316 Main Avenue.
I looked at the
Notices?
notices for both because these applications really are one and the same. One cannot be without the other, the way it's proposed. So both of them are in order, and we have jurisdiction to proceed.
Terrific.
If I may, Andrew Parrish of the firm Fox Rothschild, on behalf of the applicant, 316 Main Street LLC. It is good to see everybody live. It's been quite a long period of time.
I'm sorry, Mr. Karras, would you mind going and speaking to the microphone, so maybe sitting down? I know that you maybe prefer to stand up, but I think that it records better. Thank you.
You know, usually doing this over the past year, I'm not used to having pants on.
And the microphone just close to your mouth, please. Thank you.
And my glasses are going to fog up.
That's all right.
inevitable.
Hey, whatever.
All right, we're here for property at 316 Main Street, Block 2508, Lot 1. Just want to give a little overview of the application here tonight. The property is on the corner of Main and Bank, which is right across from us, right next to the Santander Bank. Also immediately adjacent to 700 Bank, development that was approved a number of years ago and constructed. In fact, this is a joint application between the two, because the parking for this particular property will enter through the garage at...
I'm sorry, I just remembered, I need to get my staff sworn in, but go ahead, I'll wait till you finish. I'm sorry.
Do you want me? I'll wait, go ahead.
If I may, Doug, Jason, and Donna, please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear the testimony that you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I did.
Please state your names for the record and your affiliation with the board, and please excuse my interruption.
Donna Miller, Board Planner.
Doug Cullen, Inside Engineering, Board Engineer. Jason Fisher, Inside Engineering, Board Engineer.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So the project, it's really a joint application because, as I indicated, the parking we are proposing goes through the 700 Bangs Ave property. This way, we don't have an additional curb cut, and we don't eliminate any additional parking on the street. Now, the existing building that is there right now is a two-story mixed-use building that's quite old, unsightly, if I may. And what is being proposed is a four-story building, a modern building, again, similar to the 700 Bangs, in essence, be a sister building to the 700 Bangs property, having 24 residential units, accommodation for 19 parking spaces inside, although there will be a deficit of parking, and also commercial space on the bottom floor. The plan is to demolish the existing building to build this proposed building. With the application, there are certain variances that are being requested. It's C variance relief, which is permitted under the CBD redevelopment plan. One is for commercial space, 35% is required, 13.7% is being proposed. Reason for that, in order to accommodate the parking inside, we need the additional space to provide such parking. Penthouse setback 20 feet is required. What's being proposed is 5.8 feet, similar to what is on the 700 Banks property, the adjacent sister building. Additionally, drive aisle 24 feet is required. What is being proposed is 21.2 feet. Now, with regard to the height, the height for the building as designed to the roof, and this is important, is 44 feet, 4 5/8 inches. To the top of the parapet is 48 feet, 8.5 inches. 45 feet is the permitted height. One thing I do want to mention that within the definition, or the definition of height in the CBD states that it's measured to the highest point of the building, which in essence ordinarily would be the parapet, excluding for a minute the penthouse, which is separately provided. However, on page 13 of the design guidelines for the CBD, it allows for an additional 4 feet for decorative elements above the permitted height. Our position is no variance is required on that because we're within that 4 feet permissible addition for a decorative element above the permitted height. With that being said, I have 2 witnesses I'm going to be calling tonight. One is our engineer, Greg Domilewski from Mid-Atlantic, and then secondly, I'll be calling Obi Agadusa, who is our architect from OCA Architects. He is not here yet. Greg is here, so get right to the testimony and right into the application, if I may.
Hi Greg, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you.
Almost thought to have the exhibits here, but we'll give it a shot.
Want to make sure members of the audience can see them also. If you
Yeah,
can.
we're, so we're here,
Come up,
okay?
maybe you
Yeah.
can come up and get a better angle if you can't see it. Okay. Okay, Greg, please raise your right hand. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please state your name for the record and spell it.
Sure, it's Gregory Domilewski, last name spelled D-O-M-A-L-E-W-S-K-I.
Okay. Are you still a licensed engineer in the state of New
I'm a
Jersey?
licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey. I've been sworn in before this board in the past on both sides of the table. If you'd like to go through some qualifications, if you need to hear more, but that's up to the board.
And we recall seeing him.
Move to
Thank you.
qualify him as an expert in engineering now?
Yes.
Okay.
You were just sworn? Was he sworn in?
Yes, I
Yes.
just did,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Domilewski, you're familiar with the project at 316 Main Street, am I correct?
Yes,
And also at the project that had been built at 700 Bangs Avenue, am I correct?
yes,
And I see that you have up there an overview of the area, the rendering, am I correct?
yes.
All right, what I'd like to do, and we're going to make reference to that initially in terms of the property that we're talking about for this application.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do is have that identified as A1 for identification. So A1 is going to be the overall rendering of the property. All right, Mr. Domilewski, taking a look at what's been marked as A1 for identification, can you please go through that rendering and identify the property and the surrounding area?
Sure. The property in the, for this project is located on block 2508, lot 1, with a total area of 8,222 square feet, 0.19 acres. It's located in the CBD redevelopment plan, the Central Business District, and it's located at the intersection of Bangs and Main Street. And on there you see Bangs Avenue running left right on the plan, and Main Street running north-south, Route 71, State Highway Route 71. Our project is located at that intersection. 700 Bangs Avenue is located directly to the east of our project, which is planned right. To the north of our project, across Bangs Avenue, is another mixed-use development. To the south is a commercial building, that's Santander Bank. And then to the west is the building we're in right here, directly across Main Street, which is the municipal complex. The project is past use, like Mr. Karras had said. It's an existing building that's 2 stories tall, and it's going to be demolished and replaced with a new proposed building. Do you want me to go right into the development?
Go right into it.
All right, sure. So the proposed development is going to include a mixed-use development. It's a 4-story building, plus penthouse on top of that. Ground floor is going to be commercial space and parking, and the upper floors are going to be multifamily residential, and it is a permitted use in the redevelopment plan.
How many parking spaces are being proposed? What's the amount of commercial space and how many units are being proposed?
Sure, I'll get to that one second. Let me grab another rendering out, if you would mind.
Absolutely. And we're going to mark that as A2 for identification. A2 for identification is the ground floor rendering.
I'm sorry, which, what number are we looking at?
A2.
I'm sorry?
A2.
A2.
What is A11 in this?
It's A11?
Yep.
So as Mr. Kara said, this is 316 Main Street, ground floor rendering. And what you'll see here is a rendering of just the ground floor of the development. Slice straight through both buildings of 316 Main, located at the intersection of Bangs and Main Street, and a slice through 700 Bangs right next door. So our proposed development is going to have 1,116 square feet of commercial space located directly on the west end, abutting Main Street. The building above that, the two-story, the 4 stories of residential, the 4-story building is going to contain 3 stories of residential above that, plus the penthouse.
Excuse me,
Yes.
I don't see that anywhere. I don't know where.
That'll be in the architectural elevations. You'll see the elevation of the building. This is just a slice through. This is actually
Okay.
the rendering that we brought just tonight.
All right,
it's
so
not-
we don't have this.
No. There's that board right there.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, in the future, I would prefer that the board have all renderings that you're bringing for us to see ahead of time,
Sure.
in the future,
All right,
please.
understand. So the proposed development contains 24 residential units, 18 one-bedroom units, and 6 two-bedroom units. The height of the building, the redevelopment plan permits a maximum of 45 feet. And based upon the definition, the height's measured from the center point of the curb along the frontage. So those elevations for Main Street are 20.36, and along Bangs Avenue is 20.94. And then when you take the architectural height based upon the finished floors up to the top of the roof, we get a height from Main Street of 44.09 feet and a height of Bangs Avenue to the roof at 43.51. And then per the redevelopment guidelines, it does allow decorative elements to be permitted to exceed the height requirements. However, they shall not exceed the building height limit by more than 4 feet. And the parapets and decorative elements at the corner of the building along the main Bangs and Main, the maximum height there comes out to 48.42 feet from the curb at the midpoint along Main Street. And then penthouses are also permitted on top of that, which can, be less than 12 feet in height, which they are.
Do the penthouses exceed 20% of the total roof area? Or are they less than that?
They are less than that.
Continue.
So as part of the development, as Mr. Karras has said, there's a couple of bulk variances which go into some details as I go through my testimony. That's the minimum setback of the penthouses. 20 feet is required where 5.8 feet is provided. There's the minimum ground floor commercial space at 35% where 13.7% is required. And also the drive aisle is 21.2 feet where 24 feet is required. So as far as the site design goes, we're going to propose concrete vertical curbs to be reused along Bangs and Main. We are going to replace them to the nearest joint where we have to take them out to put in utilities. We're going to then have streetscape improvements along Bangs Avenue to comply with the redevelopment plan. Those are going to include trees, street trees, benches, bicycles, bicycle racks, trash cans, and pavers along the frontage to comply with the redevelopment plan. So to access our garage on the first floor, there's actually going to be an opening from 700 Bangs into the garage. It is 10 feet wide. It will be, well, the purpose of that connection in 700 Bangs is to not have another curb cut out to Bangs Avenue directly. And what that would require is another curb cut into the street into Bangs Avenue. It would also require the elimination of some on-street parking, which we're trying to avoid. That connection between the two buildings will have a fire door that opens and closes as cars enter and exit. And it will also have some sort of light to prevent motorists from, two cars coming in at the same time. It'll light up red when a car's coming the other way, and vice versa. So when somebody's approaching to enter, the light will light up red inside 316 Main, and then the door will open, the car can pass through, and vice versa. When a car is leaving 316 Main, the light will turn red on the 700 Bank side, and that car can go out.
And that allows for safe passage of vehicles going both into and out of that space, the parking deck.
Correct.
The garage at 316, am I correct?
Correct. Yep, it'll give warning to people on both sides when that happens. The parking requirement is, per the redevelopment plan, we're required to have 1.5 spaces for 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, which is a total of 36 spaces. Per RSIS, you're required to have 1.8 spaces for a 1-bedroom, 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom, for a total of 45 spaces. We will need a de minimis exception required from RSIS in order to apply to the parking. We are providing 19 spaces in the garage that are 8.5 by 18. That's including 1 ADA parking stall. And there's also 3 compact stalls. You can see them noted there with the C's on them, sort of up against that retail on the left-hand side, the southwest corner of the parking garage there.
Presently on site, the existing building has no parking, am I correct?
That's correct.
Continue on.
Yep. So the drive aisles that are provided in our garage, we provide 21.2 feet directly when you enter the garage, and that's behind 3 parking stalls. That's the ADA parking stall, and then 2 standard parking stalls next to that. Once you get out into the main open garage area, you have a drive aisle width of 26.3 feet between the stalls at the north end and the south end of the garage. And then as you come over into the compact stall area, we have a drive aisle width of 24.5 feet between those north and south stalls there. Bicycle parking will be provided in 700 bangs, and there's going to be an agreement that'll have to be put in place as part of the access in and out of the garage, as well as the bicycle storage, in order to allow access to sort of both buildings to work as one and function as, one entrance, one exit. So those agreements will be put in place prior to construction.
And the same thing with the ingress and egress, that would be a cross-access easement between the 2 lots. Am I
Correct.
Continue on.
As far as trash for our building, the residential trash is going to be collected internally, and it's going to be stored in cans and totes. And will be brought to the curb on collection day for public pickup.
And is there a trash room on the first floor of the property?
I believe there is.
Can you identify that on the plan?
Yes. Trash room, it's not actually labeled on my plan. It's probably labeled on Booby's plan, but I believe
It's within the lobby
it's
area?
within the lobby area at the northeast corner of the building. Booby can go through the details on that first floor, exactly where that trash room is and how it'll work. The commercial space will be responsible for their own trash within their respective space, and they'll be responsible for acquiring a private hauler to pick up their trash. As far as the site design and grading goes, like I said before, the existing curbs will remain along Bangs Ave and Main Street with new ADA ramps and sidewalks installed around our proposed building. Top curb elevations range from 19.77 at the south end along Main Street to 21.16 at the corner, and then down to 20.66 near Bangs Avenue, near 700 Bangs. So you end up with a high point on the corner, and it flows down both ways. Flows south along Main Street, and it flows east. The water would flow east along Bangs Avenue. The ground floor of our building, the lobby set at 21.15. The retail space varies from 20.4 to 20.7. And the stairway is elevation 20.02. And that's to allow all doors of our building to be accessible at grade. So when you're walking down the sidewalk, all those doors will be flat with the sidewalk, no step in. As far as utilities for the project, there's going to be new sanitary, water, public utility services, and they're all proposed underground. There will be no meters in front of the building. The only the only utility that will be required in front of the building or along the frontage is the gas regulator, and that's requirement of the local gas company because they need to have that regulator vented outside. Otherwise, the meters will all be internal to the building.
Now, there are existing utilities that are adjacent to the 700 Banks building on the exterior of the building, am I correct?
Yes.
And where are those utilities going to go?
So those utilities are going to be relocated inside 700 Bangs Avenue. And likewise, there's going to be one gas regulator that will have to be installed along the frontage of Bangs Avenue for the gas company. And then all the meters will be inside of the building.
Now, there's some exterior mailboxes also at the 316 property, am I correct?
Yep.
Those going to be moved inside, am I correct?
Those will also be relocated inside.
Go ahead.
As far as mechanicals being visible from the street, they're actually going to be, there's going to be no mechanicals visible from the street. They're going to be roof mounted, and they're going to be basically hidden by the penthouses up top. So they're going to be behind the penthouses. So when you're at street level, you don't see any mechanicals on the building. As part of our design, the stormwater management, the site is served less than 1 acre, and there's less than a quarter acre of new impervious. There's actually no new impervious on the project, and therefore it's not a major development. There's no increase in impervious, so all of our stormwater runoff remains the same, ranging from 0.54 CFS for the 2-year storm up to 1.45 CFS for the 100-year storm event. There's going to be no adverse impacts to the neighboring properties. All of the stormwater is collected on top of the roof and then is tied into our stormwater collection system. And actually, Jason, as part of the design we did, we're going to tie the stormwater roof leader through 700 Bangs garage and directly out into Bangs Avenue inlet. So those connections that were going through the curb before, they're going to be eliminated, and all stormwater is going to go through a pipe, through 700 Bangs Avenue, and tie into the inlet at the south end of 700 Bangs Avenue.
So that's just another thing we need the easement for.
Correct. Yep.
By doing that way, you're eliminating any direct discharge into the street. It's a better way of dealing with the discharge, am I correct?
Correct. Yep. Landscape and lighting. Landscaping, there's no landscaping proposed to the project, proposed as part of the development. There are 4 existing street trees along Bangs Avenue that are currently in great shape. Donna's going to have it on, but if they survive construction, which we're going to protect them, we should not have to replace any trees. In the event that one of those trees or multiple of those trees actually do die, we will replace them. The lighting for the project, the garage is illuminated with ceiling mounted lights. There's sconces along Bangs Avenue and the Main Street facade to illuminate the sidewalk and to supplement the existing street lights that are out there now that are pole mounted. And they actually are a down facing light, so dark sky compliant. The penthouse lights they have decorative lights outside of each door to illuminate just the general area right at the exterior door. It's not meant to light up the entire patio, and there's no light spillage off the roof onto the ground below. I'm going to bring out the other rendering here, which will show you the rooftop penthouse.
All right, before we get to that, just going to the exterior streetscape, bike racks are being proposed on that exterior, am I correct?
They are, along Bangs Avenue, correct.
Okay, and what about the pavers that are existing right now?
The pavers that are existing are to remain, and we're going to, I assume during construction, end up relaying them or disturbing them to put in some utilities, and they'll be put back.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So anyway, the other rendering I wanted to go to is actually the rooftop rendering. And we'll mark this as...
8-3 for identification.
Hey, Green, is this in the conference?
No, it's not. So this is exhibit A3 and it's titled 316 Main Street Roof Level Rendering. And as you can see there, you sort of see the outline of the building in a brown color, and the gray squares there are the penthouses as well as the elevator shaft that comes up. And the area where our setback is 5 point, sorry, let me get the numbers straight here. It is 5.8 feet, and that occurs on the west side of the building where the penthouse is along the Main Street right away. And you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about, let me get the numbers straight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Total 8 penthouses that stick up along with the elevator shaft and the stair tower on that rooftop. And there are fences, which Obi will talk about in a little bit, that give the a little bit of privacy outdoor between each of those penthouses.
And those penthouses serve to shield all mechanical equipment, am I correct?
Correct. As far as site testimony, that's it for now.
All right, let's
Anyway.
go through the actual plans that's identified that the preliminary final major site plan.
Sure.
You have that on the board?
Here we go.
That's going to be A4 for identification.
Greg, while you're doing that, I have a question. What are the setbacks of the penthouses along the Bangs Avenue side from the edge of the roof?
Give me 1 second, like that.
I apologize, Mr. Lumen, I'm still trying to get this on the board.
That's okay. We don't have it in our packet anyway, so it's okay.
Well, you have this.
This we have. This we have, yes. Okay, which one are we looking at?
This is sheet 7 of 10 of the preliminary final major site plan set.
Okay.
And it's the roof lighting plan. And I'm just going to use the scale approximately that setback. And it looks to be about 6 feet setback from the top. They're very close to the same dimension.
Okay,
For
thanks.
the main street side.
Okay, taking a look at what's been marked as A4 for identification, am I correct? That's a preliminary final major site plan, this
Yes.
project? And what is the last revision date that is on the page 1 of 10?
Yep, the last revision date was August 13th, 2021.
So taking a look at that, we have the cover page that reflects the zoning chart on there, am I correct?
Yes,
Okay, and the second page, 2 of 10, reflects the existing conditions on the site to which you've already testified, correct?
yes,
Going to page 3 is the parking plan that you've already covered, am I correct?
yes,
And that reflects on there the proposed bicycle racks, 3 of them on Banks Avenue, am I correct?
that's correct.
And also the handicap ramps that would be constructed as part of this project at the corner of Banks and Main Street, correct?
Yes,
Continuing on page 4 of 10, that reflects the vehicle movements on the
Excuse me,
site.
Andy, for 1 second.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, you said you weren't changing any of the sidewalk or curb improvements, so that's the existing handicap ramp.
we are not changing the curbs. We're going to put in new sidewalks as part of construction because naturally when you build a building in that type of space, the sidewalks are going to be broken and messed up, for lack of a better term.
But you're going to leave the brick.
We're gonna relay those bricks as necessary to have that same paver escape along Banks Avenue.
So you're going to have to redo the wheelchair ramp.
We will have to redo the ADA ramps, yes.
And again, it reflects the 3 bicycle racks on Banks Avenue, am I correct?
Yes,
And is there overhangs with regard to the design of this building over the sidewalk?
there are. There's an overhang on the west end near the lobby, and then there's also an overhang at the intersection of Banks and Main that extends out on both sides into both right-of-ways there.
And those would require an RW easement from the mayor and council, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, page 4 of 10, if we can go to that, and if you would kindly go through the vehicle movements as reflected on that sheet.
Yeah, so what this plan shows, this shows vehicles exiting two different parking spaces, and then exiting the garage out through the 700 Bangs Avenue garage. And what this shows is that even the tightest spot down in the corner, that handicap accessible stall, has enough maneuvering room, and one of the reasons why is because it does have that core striping there to give a buffer from the sidewall. So that car is able to make a turn out and be able to get out through that garage. And that's going to be your tightest stall to get out of the garage. And again, the stalls, as you get into the middle of the garage, have more space, a lot easier to get in and out of their spaces and out of the garage.
Greg, did you run that analysis on the northwesternmost space?
On the northwesternmost space, I did not, but I certainly could.
Okay.
Going on to page 5 of 10. Okay. Just want to focus a little bit on the lobby area. It does reflect over there where the trash room would be, the meter room, and the laundry room. Am I correct?
That's correct. Shows all three spaces. As well as the elevator.
Page 6 of 10 is reflecting your elevations on the site, correct?
6 to 10 reflects the lighting plan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lighting.
Yep.
Oh. All right, well, and you've gone through the lights as being detailed for this project, am I correct?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You've gone through the lights as being detailed for
Yes.
the project. Page 7 of 10 you've covered. Page 8 of 10 reflects the bike racks, some of the striping, and the pavers for this project, correct?
Yes,
And that's all the exterior details, including the bench details for the outside, am I correct?
correct.
All right. And then we have soil erosion on sheets 9 and 10, am I correct?
Yes.
Now, you've had an opportunity to review the professional reports that were rendered in this matter, am I correct?
Yes.
All right. What I'd like to do is have you go through the report that was rendered by Insight that's dated August 30th of 2021.
Let's get that marked.
Mark
B1?
that as an exhibit B1, insight report dated
August 30th of
August
2021.
30th, 2020.
Great. Thanks.
All right, as indicated, you've had the opportunity to review what's been marked as B1 for identification, the Insight report dated August 30th of 2021, correct?
I have.
What I'd like to do is take you right to the second page, the completeness review. Comments number 1, 2, and 3 have to do with additional detail on that, and there's no objection to providing those details on the plans, am I correct?
Actually, number 3, we would request a waiver from.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that's just basically saying the location and extent of all utilities within 200 feet. And it doesn't make sense to have all utilities within 200 feet. That 200 feet does cover areas that are like, outside of the municipal building here that are across from the state highway. We would like to provide all utilities within our project frontage, or any utilities that also may impact downstream, like stormwater tie-in for the site.
Number 4 indicates existing proposed easements are not shown on the plan. Indicate if they exist, they must be documented on the site plan, and we would agree to do that upon approval of the application. Am I correct?
Yes.
Number 5, the size of the access aisles for the adjacent lot is missing from the plan.
Yep.
Okay, we'll provide that. Landscaping details and maintenance schedule. As indicated, there's no proposal to replace any of the trees. Am I correct?
Correct.
And if some do get damaged during construction, we would agree to replace those trees with new trees, correct?
Correct.
We would work with the Shade Tree Commission to have the proper trees for those particular areas, correct?
Yes.
Roof plans. In terms of the visibility of the rooftop equipment, we've already addressed that, am I correct?
Yes, and I think we're going to talk about that a little more in the elevation.
Soil boring logs,
Yep, we'll provide it.
phasing plan. There's no phasing plan for this project.
There is no phasing as part of the project. We're going to construct it all at one time, and like anything in urban construction, we're going to require temporary access to the site, maybe through the roadways, but it's an urban construction site, so it's going to be a lot of stuff in a small area.
Explain that, just because, or if you want me to wait to the end.
We can go.
Just because
Yeah, we can.
you got a two-story building that sits right on Main Street. How you knocking that down without a phasing? I mean,
Without what, I'm sorry?
without some type of phasing? I mean, are you gonna close off sidewalks? Are you gonna put like
Well, sure,
tunnels?
as part of construction, we're gonna have to shut down sidewalks along the frontage, and perhaps even like the parking lane along the side street to access to have, trucks be able to load and unload as the construction occurs. But certainly you wouldn't want pedestrians walking next to a two-story building as you're knocking it down.
But it's not a phase.
You're right, I don't want that, but I mean, then there's gotta be a phasing
Oh, so
plan.
you
I
want-
mean,
you guys want to see a
are you shutting down the
construction
street? Are you shutting down State Highway? Are you shutting down Bangs Avenue? Are you
sure,
shutting down
so-
half of it? What
so
are you
you-
doing?
That's a staging plan, and that'll certainly be provided, as opposed to developing this site in different phases, like one building or if it was a multi-building site.
Yeah,
But in terms of a staging plan, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's, you know, I'm jumping ahead here, but that would become a condition. We want to see some sort of staging plan on how that would be handled.
Yeah, sure. But to be clear, it's all, the building's built in one shot, not half building or anything like that. So it's-
Right, but with that,
But with that comes the.
we want to know how all that's going to work, plus where are you really staging?
Yes.
Where's all your equipment going to be? Are you, I mean, because you're going to need a lot of equipment to do this, so are you closing the street, or are you going across the street into the parking lot that exists? What are you going to do?
Absolutely. We'll
That's
come
what we
up-
need to know.
We'll come up with that plan, we'll present it to the.
Okay,
town.
all right. When you come back, you can show us. Okay, thank you.
During the hearings here, you want a staging plan?
Oh,
In terms
yeah.
of development?
Because what's happening through town these days is crazy. So I personally would prefer to see it. I don't know if anybody else at the board would really want to see what the real plan is.
Well, we would certainly need to know what on-street parking was being utilized.
Exactly, and so, however, whatever makes the most sense. I mean, if you're not coming back, we don't know yet. If you're not coming back, then we don't. Then I trust that the city officials would see this and agree or disagree. I don't know if that's a wise plan.
Ordinarily, it's stuff that we present to the construction department when you're getting your permits on staging your construction. But
As well as the board professional.
and the board professional.
Well, that's what we would need to, we need to make sure that, because it also has to do with all the other construction on the same street. I don't know how much there is or whatever there is, we have to work together to figure all that out.
I just honestly, I've never done it at the planning board
Mhm.
phase. It's always
But
been before the building.
but when you do it, I would like to see it, whether it's in front of here or not. I'm sure that the mayor would like to see it as well.
Yeah, as much as you've never done it, Andy, we've asked iStar as far as like even the last thing was approved, lot 4001.
Right.
Not a
And
problem.
they had to give us the staging plan for the 1101, the hotel, for what streets were gonna be closed down and everything else.
Not a
So-
problem.
Right, and the timing
Well,
of that and whatever.
well-
Okay. If you could just provide, that would be great.
Sure.
It's not, it probably would be a condition.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay?
Number 10, color rendering of the project shall be presented at the hearing. We've gone through A1 through A3 for the renderings, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, description of the project, it asks where hours of operation, number of shifts, and whatnot. This is for the most part going to be residential units, correct?
Correct.
Small amount of retail, and we don't know who the retail tenants are going to be yet, am I correct?
That's correct. Until we have a retail tenant, you're really not gonna know what hours, operations, shifts, number of employees, all of that would be unknown until somebody leases that space.
But I want to go through the retail. A suggestion was made for the retail at the bottom when we're before the TRC, to in a sense have it fluid, with the idea to be, if there are smaller tenants or tenants that require smaller spaces, be able to accommodate them, am I correct?
That's correct.
And we worked on doing that with regard to that retail space, so we don't have the space right now divided up, with the opportunity to provide smaller spaces for smaller retailers that do want to come in and operate a business in Asbury Park, correct?
Yes, it's really a flex retail space in the sense that it can be rented out as one entire area, or it could be divided up into smaller retail establishments, depending on the need and who's looking for space.
And to give the opportunity for smaller retailers to come in and open up as merchants within the city, am I correct?
But the plan, I believe, shows 2 doors for retail.
Correct.
On Main
What
Street.
we've done is, we've kept in a sense, although it has 2 doors in there at the request of the TRC, to, in a sense, be able to change that.
Okay.
So if we have, say, 4 smaller retailers to accommodate them and to allow them to open up businesses, we can be a little bit flexible with that.
Good, thank you.
Okay, on the zoning review, I'm going to number 12, location of the exterior mechanical equipment utility meters.
Yep, we talked about that, we touched on that. There's gonna be no exterior utility meters aside from the regulator, and the mechanical equipment is gonna be screened from view.
Number 13 talks about the parking. We agree 1.5 parking spaces per unit for a total of 36. 19 is being proposed, the remaining would be a fund payment, am I correct?
That's correct.
Development review, the means and methods of disposal of solid waste is indicated. For the residential units would be the public hauler, and for the retail would be private haulers, correct?
Correct.
And the residential would be within the trash room as indicated. The tenants for the retail space would have their own trash kept inside, am I correct?
Yes.
Signage would comply with the guidelines, am I correct?
Correct.
Where is the signage going to go? I'll save that actually
Yes,
for
we can
later.
talk about that.
You got it. Loading and unloading operations. There's no loading zone being prepared. We're in a semi-urban area, am I correct?
Correct.
And there's no availability for that on site, am I correct?
Correct.
And they would operate like all other businesses within the downtown CBD area, am I correct? And on Main Street? Lighting. If we can go through that. Glare from type A fixtures, penthouse. Let me go through those comments, those questions.
All right, so the glare from the type A fixture, it's downlight, so it's not going to have any glare to speak of. It doesn't shine outwards, so any units or buildings across the street wouldn't have light shining into their buildings. Again, item B, we talked about the penthouse lighting. There are small aesthetic lights just to light up the exterior doors and not provide area-wide lighting of the penthouse level. And again, that type of fixture, it's not an exposed bulb. The bulb is inside the fixture, so it's not going to create any glare for potential units across the street or next door or anything like that. Item D has to do with the lighting levels in the garage. We're going to change the alignment to reconfigure that lighting just slightly to provide that minimum of half-foot candles through all the stalls. Item E, several lighting fixtures are proposed within the city right away. We will get the mayor and city council approval for them. Item F, testimony showed requiring the potential for headlight glare being directed to Bangs Avenue through the infill panels. And as Obi will sort of go through his plan to show you, those panels and those louvers were actually moved up to block the headlights from being able to go through or be seen through there. So, but Obi will, again, provide more information.
TWA permit?
Yep, if we use one required, we'll provide, we'll get it.
Okay. Noise, air, and water quality. With regard to this proposed development, seeing it's mostly residential, small retail, no issues with that?
Correct. I don't see any negative effects from that.
Okay. Areas of pavement repair noted on the plans.
Correct.
Storage for the residents. It's within the residential units. No additional storage is being proposed. Am I correct?
No central storage.
Recyclables for 4 weeks with on-site. That trash room can accommodate that. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And by the way, similar to 700 Banks, the way the operation is, would be the super for the building who would take the trash in and take the trash out. Am I correct?
Correct.
The vehicle movements, item number 24 on page 5, if you can address each one of those.
Sure. Item A refers to the turning in and out of the first install. We presented the turning analysis plans that show how install would work. Item B is the applicant proposing a 10-foot wide aisle for the transition between 700 Bangs and the subject property, which is not sufficient for two-way traffic. Testimony showed provided, will there be any safety measures? And the answer is yes. We talked about the lights, and that it will be one way, and it will have a warning system in place. Item C is in regard to the easements, and will be cross-access easements provided. The proposed parking stalls are 8.5 feet wide, 18 feet deep. Requirement is 8.5 feet wide, 19 feet deep. Variance is required. Again, we're proposing that layout. That 19 foot, just the space is there regardless. We have a certain dimension. Whether we want to strike that extra foot, we could. It's just going to reduce that drive aisle. It's the same amount of space as that garage regardless. The proposed drive aisle, the eastern portion of the garage, is actually 21.2 from the back of the stall to the door, where 24 feet is required. Again, provided testimony to show the vehicle turning analysis plans that the area doesn't work. The applicant shall consider the feasibility of moving the accessible parking space to the opposite side of the garage, nearest the lobby entrance. We actually did have it over there. We swapped it to the side that it's on currently. to get more turning space for that vehicle exiting that stall.
All right. Additional considerations in terms of number 25, how the property is to be maintained. Again, it's not a condo, so there will be no association. It'll be through a super who would take care of the units and take care of the building. Similar, again, to the sister building at 700,000. Number 26, the comment is a finished floor. The retail space shall be indicated on the plans.
Yeah, we can add this to the plans again, but the reason that's not there, we do have the elevations shown at both of the doorways, and they do vary. So we can have some sort of, dimension to that finished floor elevation. Calling off as multiple elevations in there, but that's fine.
27, stormwater and stormwater management, always a significant issue. We've gone through, but why don't we address each one of these comments? So,
Sure. So item A, and it looks like it's just a comment there, proposed development is a minor development. There's no proposed new impervious area, but the project is more than 5,000 square feet land. Item B is no new impervious surface is proposed, therefore stormwater retention is not required. No comment there. C is stormwater report shall address impacts on the neighboring property. We talked about that. There's going to be no runoff to the neighboring properties. Then it talks about item D is a direct connection for the stormwater. We're going to provide that through 700 bags of. Item E is the applicant shall submit approval for the NJDOT. We'll do that. Item F, the plan should be revised to include spot grading with the parking area to ensure adequate drainage to the 2x2 floor area. We'll do that. And item G is a detailed before event shall be provided. We'll do that.
28, as to include structural engineering review, that'll be done at the appropriate time.
That's as far as insight. So I think the rest of these comments, or Jason, you can correct us, are pretty standard comments for the letters. I don't know if there's anything we need.
One thing I do want to address, number 31, that's about the ability of emergency vehicles to access the site.
Yes, so emergency vehicles will access the site like any other building that's constructed through the street frontage, through Bangs Ave and Main Street.
But the garage, in the event, God forbid, there's a fire in the garage, that will be sprinklered, Mike.
It will be sprinklered, correct.
All right, and I believe we've addressed all the other.
Number 34.
34?
We talked about that in the DRC,
Right.
right?
Yeah, the mailbox we've gone through.
Yeah.
We went through the exterior gas lines of the 7, we'll have a regulator, we'll move the gas meters inside.
Yeah, so all those items are basically going to be relocated to other parts of the building to avoid different parts of the building.
Next, we've had the opportunity previously, you and I, to review the planning report that was done with regard to this matter by Clark King Engineers. Am I correct?
Yes.
And that planning report is dated originally June 23rd, 2021, revised September 8th, 2021. Am I correct?
Yes.
If I may, why don't we have that marked as B2 for identification?
Yes, planning report, this is going to be the updated revised version dated September 8th, 2021, marked as B2.
Mr. Domalewski, again, you've had the opportunity to review this report and the contents that are included within this report, am I correct?
Yes.
All right, we can get right to it. There are a number of variances that are listed on this report, and we've gone through all the variances that we think or we believe are applicable, am I correct?
Yes.
One thing I want to know, in terms of the commercial frontage, when we look at this plan, although it's around 70 feet or so where there is not commercial frontage on Bangs Ave, if access did have to be provided for parking to the parking lot, not out of 700 Bangs, but directly into this building, that would have eliminated another 25, 26 feet of any potential commercial frontage, am I correct?
Correct.
And you would have eliminated the number of spaces, am I correct?
Yes.
But by providing the interior garage, not doing it that way, you accomplish a number of things. And one, you don't lose interior space and provide for more parking on the site, am I correct?
Yes.
Although you are losing commercial frontage, that's a trade-off, am I correct?
That's correct.
And we see the benefit of providing the parking through access at 700 Bangs as a greater benefit as opposed to the commercial frontage, am I correct?
That's correct.
On what basis? You a planner?
I'm not a planner.
But as an engineer, it's better engineering to do that, am I correct?
Yes.
Keep those lines right in the right spots.
Am I allowed to?
Sure.
That's not the only alternative, though.
As far as what?
I mean, off-street parking could also be done through a contribution. You don't have to do any off-street parking on-site. So then you wouldn't have either problem.
And you'd have no additional.
Or there might be another way to design the off-street parking on-site, maybe using, automated system or stackers, so you'd use even less floor area. So I'm just saying, that is one alternative.
Yeah, potentially use stackers on that, we would have, need elevated height, so that you.
So it is a trade-off as to
Yes,
Exactly.
which is the most acceptable thing.
correct.
All right, continuing on with regards to the report, just as pertains to engineering for the site.
I think the thing I'm most interested in Mr. Domilewski addressing is, and I'm kind of surprised you guys didn't raise this issue, is the accessible parking design.
Accessible parking design is part of what?
Isn't the requirement that it be a 16-foot wide van accessible space? That it's a 8-foot lane and an 8-foot aisle, or some combination that's 16 feet wide and not 13 feet?
8 foot, 5 foot because of headroom in there, entering that garage. I don't believe the access is gonna have the requirement for van accessible overhead clearance.
What is the overhead plan?
I don't know offhand.
I mean, is that even a thing?
It is.
So they can not have to provide a van accessible space, or not creating access into the building that can accommodate a van?
That I don't believe so. The thing I'm referring to is the minimum height required, which I'm going by memory, just under 8, I think. I don't remember the exact.
Yeah, I didn't actually check that, but the dimensions of the spaces, I mean, I thought the minimum is they have to provide a minimum van accessible space, which is a combination of 16 feet,
Yeah.
whatever, whether it's 11.5 or 8 and 8.
11.5.
So, and then the other piece of that is the direct access. So it can't be across the drive aisle from the lobby entrance.
Or why don't we address that if we can accommodate that?
Yeah, certainly we can accommodate the van accessible size stall regardless of the headroom. We'll have to potentially remove one space from the garage. I can take a look at, possible reconfiguration of the garage. However, I did feel that spot is the best location for that ADA accessible stall based upon turning radiuses and all that. Certainly we work with professionals to come up with the best layout for that garage for those spaces.
I'm not quite sure where we've landed here. What the issue was and what are we
Greg, can you pull up
proposing?
Yeah.
So,
That
why
sheet.
don't you do the rendering? Do you have the
Yeah.
rendering with the, I think that best illustrates it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually behind here still.
So yeah, we lose a space.
Yeah, so right now, we provide an 8-foot wide handicap stall here with 5 feet of striping for the handicap stall. So to provide a van accessible size stall, it'd have to be a 5-foot wide striping here, an 11-foot wide stall. I think we could put it over here, and then you would still have 2 spaces here. We'll come up with best configuration, but again, you actually may be closer from your stall to the lobby entrance here than you are from the side door. We can measure it and figure it out, but yes.
So
We
is
can change
this,
the configuration.
is this something that's required by code, or is this something we would like, or what is this?
It's required.
It's required by code. So right now, what you're proposing is not code.
Well, I thought it was based upon head clearances into the garage.
Okay, so it's not code, so we do have to resolve this.
Correct. So
Okay.
we'll resolve it.
Okay.
And if it's okay with you guys, we'll work with the professionals to come up with the best layout for that space with the handicap stall
Mm-hmm.
in the garage.
Yep.
And unfortunately, if it requires losing the space, we're going to lose space, but we have to provide that, am I correct?
Correct.
But what?
We'll provide it. We're gonna have to provide it. So we'll work with the professionals to make sure that we're complying with the code requirements and providing that space.
Right, but it might take away a space.
That
Might
is-
take-
Right, I understand that, and it goes back to, I guess, Jason's report number 13. As far as like, it's how many spots, you provide 19, you're supposed to provide 36, so there's 17 missing. But I never heard, what's the answer, where are the 17 going?
It's a fund payment.
You're gonna pay into the fund?
That is-
Okay, I never heard that, okay.
No, we provided, that's what we had indicated, we're gonna pay into the fund.
Okay. So now if you're one more short, you pay another 15,000.
That is
Okay.
correct. That is correct.
Does your architect know the head clearance in there?
I don't know if we have.
I know it's not up yet, we can address it later.
Yeah,
but-
he hasn't been sworn in yet.
Okay.
I'm just gonna look to see if it's.
And while we're on parking, are any of them proposed to be electric?
We were not proposing any electric spaces in the garage.
And then Jason, when we get back to, when we're done, I'm gonna ask you if you're happy with all their answers on your question 24 as far as, you're the engineer as far as turning radius and everything else. I know they submitted plans, but you're the professional, you're gonna have to tell me, yeah, they're good, they're bad, and they have to be tweaked.
You want me to tell you now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Sure.
It's tight, it's not unique, excuse me. It's not unique to a site like this, in an environment like this, but they are tight. They provided the turning plans, which are accurate to the software. It's representing a passenger vehicle, a standard car, and how that would move in there. So when you look at that plan, and the plan said how the car is moving, that's supposed to be a real thing. If you guys are comfortable with that, then I would say, okay, some of it is substandard. I did ask him to show a turning movement to that northwesternmost space, if you wouldn't mind pointing to it, Greg.
Yep, that's the space right there.
Yeah, that could be a little tight, it might work, it wouldn't be the first time, but, you know,
Yeah.
as long as that's good. We did in the design review committee talk about that 10-foot driveway connecting, and what a challenge that could be for cars passing. And we talked about a light, and they gave testimony about that light. So it's tight down there. I think it can work if you guys, if it doesn't exceed your threshold for what you're comfortable with.
Okay, then the last one that I'll go back to is number 31, emergency vehicles. As tight as it is, ambulances are bigger than vans. Can an ambulance fit down here?
You know, that's a question we have to ask. And so you could get all different kinds of answers, and there might be code requirements, but in reality, without putting that comment down there, emergency vehicles are gonna pull up on the street. If the building's on fire, nobody's going under it.
I'm talking
The
about,
ambulance
Yeah.
has to get.
talking about an ambulance.
Right, they're just gonna go pull right up to the door.
And just going back briefly to the parking stalls in the garage. that
The
you were
doors,
talking about.
wait a second, the parking garage is up underneath
700.
316, and the doors back at 700, so,
Oh, I mean the regular door.
The lobby.
The lobby doors.
Right.
Okay.
That's on the first.
okay.
Yep.
Just going back real quick to the parking lot layout, one thing to mention and note is that the parking stalls are actually going to be assigned parking stall spaces, and which helps people get in and out of stalls. Because once they are doing that multiple times, they know what they have to do to get in and out of that stall. It's not like you just have a random visitor or person pulling in and saying, oh, I'm going to try and jam my pickup truck into that little stall over there. It's just not that. There'll be assigned stalls.
And then the one other thing I had about the parking was, and I didn't have it in my report, but use of wheel stops, so we're not hitting the walls.
Certainly we can provide.
Mr. Mayor, by the way, that's one of the reasons with the sprinklers, is God forbid there's a car fire, that's why the sprinkler is there. Because knowing that, to get a fire engine in there in any parking lot is extremely.
No, right. Thank you.
Okay, and then the other thing in my report, so you've changed from putting in street trees to not putting in street trees.
Correct. So the plan all the time on as indicated on site plans is that if any of those trees get damaged, destroyed, or die during construction, we'll replace those trees.
So who are we going to leave as the arbiter of whether those trees are need to be replaced? Is it going to be a third-party arborist or just leave it to the Shade Tree Environmental Commission? What is the board comfortable with?
Could make it part of the maintenance guarantee.
For the existing trees.
Again, who's going to make the call, though? Is it going to be just engineering inspection, or are we going to get an arborist?
I'm trying to think what we did on 700 Bank.
Because I know what you've said about the trees, and
Yeah,
so
we
there's
said-
like 3 moderately hanging on okay trees and 1 really kind of scraggly tree. And they're going to get compacted, and I'm not
Yeah, I
convinced
just
that they
hate
were.
to, I hate to cut down trees that are nice after construction just because we say today that we need new trees. And all said and done, you still have nice trees there that we have to cut down to, you know,
So again, it's your idea of what's nice and what our idea of nice.
understand.
How about we agree to put in Japanese maples?
Stop. Andy, you don't even know that that's like a running joke in my office.
Is it
It's
real?
Japanese.
Put one in my house.
I think the key is that, so the new ordinance amendments, we had improved the design standards so that we have better root zone requirements for street trees. And I'm pretty sure what's out there are not having that benefit. So I'm not convinced that they are going to be thriving by the time you guys are ready to have your grand opening. And so the city would definitely benefit by new trees using the new planting standard. And then you ultimately benefit because those trees will thrive and they will look more like what our expectation is. But I totally agree with Jason, and put it in the maintenance guarantee.
What kind of tree, I'm just looking at what you had. Honey locust, blue, the London plane tree. Yeah, I don't know. You know, one of the things that I was just discussing with my client is whether or not on these street trees, we want to put guards around it. So the dogs, unfortunately, especially female dogs, they end up damaging the trees. If they go on.
You guys want to handle that, or?
And I'm a dog lover, so, but I know what my dog does.
I'm not convinced that is a significant factor in the decline of urban street trees.
Is it really?
Again, the root zone is the primary thing that drives success of street trees.
So it makes sense then if you have tree guards around to prevent.
And so what is your, maybe my understanding of a tree guard is not what you're saying is
I'm
a tree
thinking the
guard.
box, that, create
Okay.
that box around where the tree is planted. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, that is a supplemental measure outside of what goes
But
on with the root
just trying to
zone.
protect
And it does
trees.
reduce contact with the trunk and the immediate area near where the tree is planted.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at ways to make sure that the trees survive and thrive.
And the primary thing for that is a great root zone. So that means the area that the ball of the tree is in is less rocks and more friable, aerated
Yeah.
material, and that gets water. So like, again, depending on where we're talking about, where we, for example, the development on Memorial that's proposed, as part of the stormwater management, we're going to have stormwater runoff
From
go
the
into a
root
tree
zone,
well.
yeah.
So we don't want to flood the root zones of those trees, so they have to have
Just
a means of
curiosity,
drainage.
How big is that area that you want to do it's in the standards, I'm sorry, I haven't seen them yet. How big of an area is that underneath the sidewalk?
5 times the root ball.
What's that?
5 times the root ball.
So
So if you're talking a 3-foot root ball, it's substantial area.
So you want to put organics underneath 15 feet?
It's not entirely organics, because it needs to be structural. We understand.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Just want to have cracked sidewalks everywhere.
Yep. It's on the website now, so you can look it right up.
Now, listen, I agree, street trees are important. Actually, there's an interesting article in the Times recently where they compare areas of street trees in urban areas and where there aren't, and just how provide shade, especially as we get hotter.
Affects, yeah.
So we'll work through that issue in terms of the trees. We'll work through that.
So those were the primary concerns from my report. If you don't want to have to go, we don't have to go through every page.
That's all I have then.
Board questions?
That's all, then we have board questions, anyone?
There was a bit of testimony regarding architecture, but I don't know if we should hold those questions until the architect testifies?
Yes.
Okay, because I have some questions about the height and all that. So we talked about, one of the variances is the 21-foot drive aisle. Where exactly is that located? Is that at the back of the lobby?
So yes, that's exactly right behind the lobby.
Okay. Now, with Jason, if there's only perpendicular parking on one side, is this a 24-foot drive aisle still required?
Yes.
Okay. And then, could you explain a little bit more about how this connect door works? It's a light that, does the driver push a button to?
So they're going to have key fobs.
Okay.
And what happens is when you hit the key fob, this door is going to use a roll-up door, and then the lights will come on. That somebody's going to be driving through it, and then you go ahead and go through the door, and then it's going to close behind you.
Okay.
And that's going to actually be a fire door.
Okay.
It's part of your fire door.
I think those are the only questions I have right now.
I have a follow-up, with, maybe not a question, but let me just put out there. The discussion we just had about the trees, and you guys mentioned, and we'll work through it. Depending where this thing goes tonight, I think I'm gonna need a little more clarity on that.
I would say we wait for deliberations to talk about that further, but
Yeah, I think we should.
yeah.
Perfectly fine, yep.
Okay.
Yep. Anybody else from the board or the professionals have anything?
I have a question for Jason.
Go for it.
When you were talking about the parking stalls, we're talking about the 3 compact stalls. Are you satisfied with that? I know you said everything is going to be very tight, but the number of parking stalls that are designated for the compacts, are you comfortable with that mix?
Yes. So there is adequate space behind the stall when you talk about things being tight in there. It's not so much the drive aisle. The spaces are smaller, and you'll have to forgive me, it was a while back when we looked at this thing that I looked at what's permitted. I'd have to look that up and brush up on it. But I don't think it's out of the ordinary what's being proposed.
So it's sounding that what we're talking about is that the width of the drive aisles and the size of the stalls are all, if we're comfortable with it.
It doesn't meet the standards, but the testimony they're giving is that it functions. So this is the balance Don is talking about, the pluses and the minuses. If you think that this can function safely and adequately, then you've got off-street parking spaces. If you think that it's a little too cramped, then it gets thinned out a bit, and they have to compensate some other way for the parking requirement. And my thoughts on it are, yeah, I think it can function. I still want to see more on that northwestern space, but I think it can function. But yeah, it's tight. This is way better than some Hoboken parking garages I've been in.
So are there any other spaces besides that northwest corner space that we need
Well,
shown?
they provided a turning plan.
I see for 2 of them.
For the space in the narrowest drive aisle there, they provided that. If they're gonna run the analysis again, they could, to Jim's point, they could run the compact spaces as well. But yeah, if you get that, where the narrow drive aisle is and that northwest space, those are really the toughest.
Okay.
If those function, the rest of them.
Okay.
And the other thing that we talk a lot about at the DRC, again, I mentioned earlier, is that 10-foot wide pass-through.
Right.
I think that is, and is what it is kind of situation. That's the difference in having parking on this property or not. I don't know, they gave me an answer when we spoke, and it sounds like there's not much of an option there to make it wider.
But at the same time, I don't think that, with all due respect for the planning board, that we know enough to know if that's okay.
Well,
The 10-foot.
so, a residential garage isn't even quite that wide. You know what I mean? So a car can get through. Cars to go on the road, I think the maximum allowed is like 8.5 feet or something like that. So a car can go through 10 feet, but this is a two-way operation. They put in the light. They're not the first ones to do that.
Right.
And again, I think it'll function.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's assigned and there's residents going in there helps because they're gonna learn how to do it. And the biggest contrast to that is like a 7-Eleven. If you did parking like this for 7-Eleven, it'd be a demolition derby. But for residents to go in here, I think they'll figure it out.
Okay.
I have a quick question about, I think this is an easy answer, but you were talking about the street trees, you said bangs only, just because Main Street was part of the, what was the issue with Main Street trees?
It's just because there's none there now. So
So there's no existing and there's no proposed.
and there's no requirement of the development plan or anything like that for a streetscape along Main Street, as far as I'm aware.
So I will say to that the city does have a DOT grant to install street trees, bike racks, and benches along Main Street. So in a way, having the site not have those items on Main Street may actually help to make it a more consistent feel on the corridor if the city project does that versus a piecemeal tree versus.
I have another question for Craig. You indicated that the gas meters would be in that room, the mechanical room on Bangs Avenue, correct?
Yes, there's going to be, the gas meter will be inside the building.
Okay, but you also indicated that there'll be regulators out on the sidewalk.
There's going to be one single regulator out on the sidewalk.
I thought you said one on Main, one on Bangs?
No, just, there's going to be one along Bangs for 316 Main, and there's going to be another one along Bangs for 700 Bangs.
Okay, and where is that located?
It's going to be sort of in conjunction with the gas company when we deal with their connections, but I would imagine it's going to be somewhere right outside the lobby area. It's a small little disc, and that's their regulator that has to be installed outside the building. Requirements from the gas company. They cannot be inside the building.
Is that going to be guarded in any way, or is it flush with the sidewalk?
I think typically when we've done it, or when the city has done it on other buildings around the city, it's just along the facade of the building, no special protection or anything like that, because you do have the sidewalk between any parking vehicles and that regulator. Now, if the regulator does end up near the 700 Bangs entrance, we certainly would have to haul it around it.
Yeah, right now, they're exterior meters, and honestly, it looks awful.
I'm sorry.
Right now, they're exterior. There's whole exterior
It's a couple meters outside.
meters outside. That'll all come inside, so it'll be a much better view. I did not see it.
Well, while we're talking about utilities, just to clarify, all the utilities would be coming in from Bangs, is that right?
To the maximum extent practical, yes.
Okay.
I don't know exactly where, like electric or cable or anything that would be fed. It may have to be fed through Main Street, I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
But when we deal with those public utility providers, we're sort of at their mercy for them to
Right.
tell us.
But gas and water are from the Bangs side?
Yes.
Okay.
If you go out to Main Street for anything, do we have to get DOT approval for anything?
We would have, yeah.
The sewer connection out to Bangs or out to Main?
Sewer connection is out in Banks.
You mentioned earlier about replacing, somebody asked a question about replacing the ADA ramp. Did I understand correctly, that's the one at the intersection of Main and Bank?
Yes,
So you need DOT approval for that,
we're
eh?
gonna need DOT approval for that, so.
So if you add anything, it'll just become part of your application.
Correct. And all of our utilities that we're proposing to construct as part of the project are out of banks. From what I understand is if the utility companies such as, JCP&L or anybody, goes out there and has to do their connection from Main Street, they permit that themselves with DOT and then bring the service in.
Is
But
the-
all of our ground fed utilities, our water and sewer and storm are all through bank. We're not proposing any connections out there.
Is the completion of the Main Street reconstruction project going to affect your construction in any way? In other words, will the state permit you to do anything to their paving for the next whatever period of time?
Yeah, well, as part of our project, we're not proposing to disturb any asphalt on Main Street. Everything is all cut into Bangs Avenue.
All right, can I just have a question about once again with the parking, and I'm just a little confused about that ADA spot. When we're saying that we're 36 spaces are required, you're providing 19. You're actually providing 18, because one's ADA, so you're not assigning that to a resident.
But there's still 19 total spaces that are being provided.
Right, but really it's only 18 that are usable.
Well, no.
No, it's still usable space.
That's usable.
But if there's no one in the building,
There could be.
there could be, but you're not assigning it to that person.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Do you?
You would.
Because what if you have two people that need it?
Well,
I mean, I'm sorry, but a number of the,
by law, you have to provide one.
right, you have to
When they look
provide
at the
one.
data, they expect there's only going to be, based upon, I guess, percentages within the public, only one person. You always have that risk of any building, no matter where you build it, that there are going to be more handicapped people than handicapped spaces.
Right.
There's nothing you can do with that.
So your intention, just to be clear, is to assign this space to someone. That's your
If
intention.
they're handicapped.
No, agreed. But that's your intention.
If they're handicapped.
If they're handicapped, your intention is to assign this one to that person. Okay. Okay. I'm assuming that we haven't seen yet where the bicycles are going to be parked. That's part of the 700 banks?
Yes.
Okay. I see that there's only one set, essentially, even though there are three, the bike racks that are on the side, on banks. Is that something, should we have that closer to the lobby, or, I mean, that's up to more transportation type?
we could talk about deliberation. My thought was to spread those three along the Bangs Ave frontage.
Okay, so not having them all together like we
Right.
have it today.
Yeah.
That's in the plan.
Right.
All right, so that might be spread out, and that would be upon the approval of transportation. Okay. Trash cans are going to stay the same as they are today, where you have it at the corner?
Yes.
Okay. And there will be no light spillage, as you said, off from the garage? There will be no spillage onto the street?
Right, and as indicated, those grades were actually moved up.
Right, so you wouldn't do that. And I have a question for transportation also, again, is that we had stated there were no electric spaces provided. Is that smart?
Well,
Or is that something that we should say, well, we need 3 or something? That's what I'm just, I don't know what we should be asking.
I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, the state of New Jersey actually just adopted a model ordinance that says, and it literally just came out this week. I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of it, but it basically requires any new construction of a parking site facility to have at least make-ready EV spaces. So I don't know.
It doesn't say how many?
It does. It does dictate how many, I believe. And I'm not sure how it impacts like this project, which obviously has been in the works, right? So it's probably grandfathered in. But at some point, any new construction in the state of New Jersey with parking facilities is going to require at least make-ready EV parking.
And I'm familiar with that ordinance too, and it is, obviously this would be grandfathered in, but I think it's or we've talked in the past about encouraging developers to do that. Now it's coming.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions
Yeah,
of the engineer?
Also, I'd like a little more explanation on the penthouse setback. I think the ordinance requires 20 feet, you're proposing 5.
Yep, it's, the number I gave before is estimated, but Obi will certainly talk about.
Okay, he'll talk about that.
The reasoning, that might get into planning, so that wouldn't be,
Sorry?
that might be a planning issue.
Okay. So someone else will speak to it. Okay. Because I'm interested in that as well. All right, anybody else?
You know, while we're talking about parking,
Mm-hmm.
how many spaces are actually required? Are we talking about 36 or are we talking about 44?
Not 36.
36.
Well, 36 is required, but it doesn't-
RSIS is a
doesn't the
different.
state require an additional?
The code requirement under the redevelopment plan is for 36. RSIS is an additional amount, but under the municipal code and under CBD, it's 36.
And that's what we held most
Yeah, the
people.
city has historically in all redevelopment areas gone with the, works under the city ordinance as opposed to the state RSIS standards.
Yeah, for 1 and 2 bedroom is 1.5. There was an amendment to the CBD plan years ago. For studios, it reduced it to 1. There are no studios in this building.
Anybody else? Okay, let's, and if city professionals are okay? No more questions? All right, let's open it up for public questions. Anyone?
Sir?
Any public questions?
I'd like to
Okay,
ask him any questions.
all right,
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right.
Just want to make sure.
No
I give
problem.
you the opportunity. Okay.
all right, let's move on.
Before we go to the next witness, can we take about 3 to 5,
Sure.
please? Thanks.
Can we get a 5-minute recess, Irina?
Motion to recess.
Motion for 5-minute break?
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Are we
Okay.
back in order?
Ready? All right, I will now take roll. Mayor John Moore?
Here.
Michael Manzella?
Here.
Jim Henry?
Here.
Jennifer Sauter? Here. Eric Gallopo?
Here.
And Barbara Krisak.
Here.
Thank you, everyone and staff.
I just have a quick question. I mean, can we still ask questions about the refuse, recycling, and storage, or is this for this witness, or do we have to go back?
Probably for our engineer, but want to reopen it?
I'd like, well, it seems as though I'd like to discuss 4.6A on in the CCH discussion about the size of the containers that are going to be provided, if that's significant, if it's sufficient storage. It seems short.
All right, why don't we do this? I'm going to, after the architect, I'm going to have my client testify. Who's
Okay.
familiar with the operation.
That's
of the
fine.
building, and he'll be able to go into that.
Okay, because I'm not sure if we really went through all of the, because I don't remember us going through that.
All right, I know we have gone through the garbage, but Mr. Sackman has
That's
a
fine.
lot of familiarity with the size of the.
That's fine. We can do that.
plans and what we need.
All right.
Okay. Our architect,
Sir, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear that the testimony about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record and spell it.
My name is Obiora Agudosi, Obiora. Last name is Agudosa.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Ogudosi.
Obi.
Obi has been qualified before as an architect before this board on quite a number of occasions. If necessary, I'll present his qualifications. And I said, would be permitted to testify as an expert in architecture, up to the board.
We've had Obi go here before.
Obi,
We're okay.
leave it up to you, guys.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to present this project to you guys. OCA was part of the team that did 700 banks, which was a really nice project that Cyclone wanted to do. So it's a pleasure to continue that building, to create a sister building that we have today. We've worked with the developer. We also worked with the professionals to refine the exterior elevation of the building based on the location of it along 700 Banks on Main Street. So the struggle is how to try to tie the two buildings together and not, still make it look very cohesive. In dealing with 700 Banks, then we have the issue with Main Street. What happens to that based on all the other buildings along that street? So what you see before you is as a result of collaboration between the builder and the professionals, taking their guidance and working with the elevation and trying to present where we are today. As testified by the civil engineer, this is the floor plan that we have.
What I want to do is first, I want to mark this. This will be A5 for identification, and A5 are the architectural plans that previously submitted to the board. Am I correct?
Yes.
And that has a last revision date of August 13th, 2021, correct?
Yes.
And that's what's up on the screen in front of us, correct?
Yes.
Good.
So this is the first floor level. As testified by the civil engineer, we are connecting the two buildings through an opening that connects both of them. And yes, as accurately portrayed by your professionals, it's the 10-foot opening that we have to modify the existing stair in 700 in order to create that. And we tried everything to even make a wider base. That's it right there. So that's what we have. So we have that opening to connect the two buildings. And then we have the parking designated as you've seen. So on the second, third, and fourth floor, basically we have a unit. We have 8 units per floor. We have a total of 24 units, 18 one-bedrooms and 6 two-bedroom units. Organized the way we were saying. We've tried to put the 2 bedrooms along Main Street at the corner so that we can maximize that corner and provide a nice image at the corner of that building. Units are laid out. I can zoom in on floor please. So on the first floor, on the second floor, we have balconies which we provided towards the back of the building, which you can see. This is similar to 700, what we did in 700. We found that was very nice for 700 Banks. So we try to replicate it here. And the 1-bedroom units are organized towards the back, as you can see. We provided ample kitchen space, galley-type kitchen. The bedrooms all have a view of the exterior in terms of windows. And this layout is designed so that they are adaptable. So the units are all adaptable. The bathrooms are all designed to be adaptable. We'll be able to meet the code in terms of the building code requirements for the building. And when you look at the units that's facing banks, again, we're also doing the same thing, 1 bedrooms and then 2 bedrooms at the corner of the building, as indicated. Yeah, so that's what we have. So this is repeated throughout the upper floors. Again, we have a central corridor, and you can see on the left portion of the building, that's where we're tying into 700 Banks. So we're using that stair for both buildings. Of course, based on code requirements, we've done all the calculations to prove that that stair is capable of handling the number of people that we have there. The whole idea is to make these two buildings appear the same. So the second, the third floor are pretty much the same. What we are doing then is creating a way to get up to the roof, which we've provided, and I know you guys have had some discussion on that. This is similar to what was provided for 700 banks. And we found that, this is a very nice feature for the unit, and given this current environment that we are all in, it's a great thing to be able to allow tenants to go outside, get some fresh air. So this tries to do that. So we've provided the outdoor space. There's a stair that comes up to it, to the roof area. We provided an area for a sink and maybe a refrigerator. And then from there you can go outside, get some fresh air. And the reason why that was done is to limit the tenants going up and down the stairs to go down to the floor below to get refreshments. So this makes it very convenient to do that. As testified by the civil engineer also, this also provided opportunity for us to hide all the mechanical units behind the walls that is created. As you can see, we've shown some of them, and we're using split system, which does not really require a lot of big heavy machine, mechanical units. So we're able to hide them behind those pop-ups on the roof. And each of the roof area, the outdoor space itself is screened in, so each tenant has their own space to use. The elevation, so this is the elevation along Banks Avenue. Again, we had a very productive meeting with your professionals in terms of how to try to make the elevation tie better with some of the banks. And based on that collaboration and discussion and suggestions, we'll be able to change the main entrance, which is, you can see from here, is this area here. We used to have the door more to the left, and through talking and exchanging ideas, we're able to bring it more centered, so it's more defined. It defines more of the entrance.
And create symmetry within that area.
Yeah, within that area. So that was that. Thank you guys for pushing for us to do that. That was quite helpful. And on the first floor, as testified before, we have parking. So there's a lot of parking that faces along the Banks Avenue. So because of that, we've created a wall, a lower wall that is high enough so that it can hide all the lights from the cars. And then we've created some grills, to kind of open areas, area along the street. Again, trying to tie it down, bring that down with the elevation. So at least, even though it's a garage, it doesn't really look like a garage. We try to do that. So that's what you'll see. And then on the right side of it, where the corner between the Banks and Main Street, we've tried to treat that differently, just to create that interest at the forefront. On the left side, we've also shown the views, because the issue of the setback of the bulkhead, whether you can see it from the street. So we did a section to it. In my office, we use Revit to do all our projects, which means we can get photorealistic images and views of the project itself. So what we are showing you is what the view, the line of sight would be, because the parapet will block some of those the roof area.
Now, in terms of the color scheme for that penthouse, it was a little bit, I believe, initially darker. That was changed to a lighter color to blend into the sky, not the islands, correct?
Yes, similar to what is on the 700 banks.
What was the basis for the color? I'm sorry, I missed it.
To blend more into the sky.
Thank you.
So that's the elevation. This one here is the elevation of on Main Street. Again, trying to create, make the facade kind of speak to each other. We also work on this facade based on comments from the professionals and tweaked it. Right now, I believe what we have will really be nice at the site. When you look at the photorealistic images we've done, you get a true sense of what that looks like.
Now, on the retail space on the bottom, there's a lot of discussion that we've had going back and forth in how to create that retail space. Am I correct in the view?
Yes.
And we decided, based upon conversations and working through, not to do a new wall to provide opportunity to break up that space. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right, why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Because based on lessons learned from 700 banks, where we have a much bigger floor plate, much bigger commercial area to work with. There was concern that, because of the city's interest in having smaller businesses participate in this, this area, we went through the process of trying to not provide the knee wall so that it will allow us to break the space up as need be. We are currently showing 2 doors to enter, but you can easily, as testified earlier on, we can swap one of the curtain wall systems for, a door. So if the situation presents itself where we have 3 tenants, then we can react to it. If it's 4, we can react to it.
And it gives an opportunity for smaller businesses to be able to open and serve as a merchant within the community where they may not have it otherwise, correct?
Yes, yes. It also reduces the cost for them, because the space is much smaller. So those are the part of the reasons why we went through the trouble of, breaking it accessible. So this is the side, this is the back of the building, the elevation you are seeing. I know there's been discussion, and we had the discussion with the professionals in terms of how to treat this elevation. We do know that the developer is also developing 722 Matheson Avenue, which is directly behind this, so it will totally block this view that you are seeing now. And that project, I believe, is in the process of being activated. So this elevation shows that you can see on the second floor the outdoor space for the second floor units, similar to what we have in 700 banks. And then the next elevation is pretty much this one here that we're showing from the other side of it, which in reality doesn't really exist. The 700 banks is right next to it.
So this is the view from 700 banks, and the building didn't exist, looking into the building, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Yeah. Again, there's been discussion about the how to protect the garage, so that this is what we are planning to use with the product that's been specified for it. And this drawing attempts to show the relationship between 316 and 700 banks, because as we indicated, they are, sister building is part of the submission that we put in, and this was also presented by the civil engineer. Again, just trying to show the relationship between the two buildings, how they relate to each other. This is the rendering. Shows what the building looks like.
We find, let's stick to that for a minute. What I want to do is I want to mark that rendering. Actually, that's the front of the
Yeah,
The cover sheet.
All right, that's a rendering of looking at an intersection of Main and Bank, am I correct?
Yes.
And you see them down banks, in a sense, the sister building, similar design, 700 banks, correct?
Yes.
We show the consistency of the design on the two buildings, correct?
Yes.
Also shows how the building is broken up, where it's just not a flat wall, there are design elements to it, correct?
Yes.
Why don't we go into, just explain a little bit about what went into the design elements and how you came up with that.
Yeah, for this particular building, again, trying to, because we are connecting the two buildings, so there's a consign that it would be a long wall. So we wanted to break up the exterior into different components, treating the corner, which is the main street, and some of the banks, it being the anchor, and then breaking away from it, and then breaking down the rest of the building. If you notice, there's the white area here. We are using that to call out the entrance to 316 Main Street, so that it's, it has its own identity, even though it's part of the bigger building. We wanted it to still say, okay, I'm here, So we did that just to break that up. And then as you turn the corner, we wanted to continue the vernacular that we've established on Banks Avenue to move it over to the other side of along Main Street.
And also on Main Street, it gives the opportunity to bring a new, updated, modern building onto Main Street, am I correct?
Yes, yes. And the truth of the matter is that as we go further Main Street, we don't know what's going to happen to those older buildings. So we wanted to use this to kind of establish what that corner looks like, and hopefully, as time goes on, move on from there.
Now, there are numerous design exceptions that are required relative to this project, am I correct?
Yes.
And we've gone, when you look at page 2 of what's been marked as V2, the Cch report, that reflects in there a lot of design exceptions, am I correct?
Yes.
The reason is to keep consistent with the design exceptions that were granted for 700 banks, correct?
Yes.
So you're consistent with that building for reasons that you already expressed, am I correct?
Yes.
What I'd like to do then is go through with you certain comments within V2 Cch report. And you've had the opportunity to go through that.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Now, if we take a look at page 3.1, building design, it talks about the relationship with the surrounding building. That the proposed building and penthouse can be considerably higher than the building immediately adjacent to the south along Main Street. Am I correct?
Yes.
The permitted height for this building though is permitted to be this high. Am I correct? On this
Yes.
site?
Yes.
The rooftop is less than 45 feet. There's no more than 4 feet in the additional parapet. Am I correct?
Yes.
And under the redevelopment plan, you can go up no more than 12 feet on a penthouse as long as it doesn't occupy more than 20% of your rooftop, am I correct?
Yes.
And this implies that, correct?
Yeah.
However, it requires an easement for the townhouse because we're close, not more than, we're not 20 feet away from the edge of the building. Am I
Not
correct?
an easement,
Exception.
I'm sorry,
Exception.
a variance.
Yeah.
No, it's
design
a variance.
exception.
No, it's a variance.
A variance, okay.
But we require a variance for that, am I correct?
Yes, and for this particular building, because this lot is much narrower than some of the banks, it presented a challenge because you don't have, the depth that you have in 700. And again, since they are quote-unquote sister buildings, the opportunity to have an outdoor space, which we believe will enhance the life of the tenants there, will really activate the street. We tried everything to just provide that amenities, given the challenges that we have.
And the rooftop penthouses are similar to what we have on 700 Bank.
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Continuing on. There's a comment on page 8 going to page 9 about the south side of the building, whether or not equipment would be visible facing that way. Now, that's temporary because the building at 725 has not been constructed, am I correct?
Yes.
So that's only a temporary condition. Any visibility to the rooftop looking, look actually on the south part of the building, but looking north, correct?
Yes.
Just the connecting. There are canopies based upon the design and parts, elements of this building that extend into the ROW, right? Am I correct?
Yes.
So we require an easement, am I correct?
Yes.
Why don't we identify those areas of the building that extend into that right?
So the entrance, which we marked here, and also this area here, comes up a little bit.
Not in multiple storefronts. There's a comment on page 10 of 18 about fixed windows on the upper floors of Bangs Avenue facade awning windows, am I correct?
Yes.
And they exist within this proposed development?
Yes.
And that's consistent with what we've done on 700 Bangs and to remain, or to continue that consistency with the two buildings, am I correct?
Yes.
The facade color, again, that's consistent with 700 Bank, different than what we have in the adjacent bank building. That's more of a historical building, correct?
Yes.
This is not a historical design, though. It's a modern building that's being added to Main Street Baghdad, am I correct?
Yes.
And the color palette that you picked out, again, consistent with 700 Bank, does it meet a modern type building that we see being constructed today?
Yes.
On signs on page 10, it indicates the architectural plans contain I'm sorry, my glasses keep fogging up as I'm trying to read this. Indicate final lettering in the glass transom over the storefront as well as 16-inch by 8 long signboard above the storefronts. Why don't you discuss the signage that is being planned for those storefronts?
So I'm going to zoom in on it so we can see.
Trees.
Okay, so the plan that we have is to try to put all the signage on that upper portion of the, do blackout to provide, the signage up here.
So
Again,
consistent with the building, you would have that consistency in terms of the signage on that upper transom, am I correct?
Yes. It gives us flexibility depending on whether you have 3 tenants or 4, we can, fit it in within and slide it along the street.
And that signage would comply with the UZ guidelines, am I correct?
Yes.
Would it be consistently opaque above the mullion in the transom? Like essentially a spandrel section?
Yeah, we can make it opaque, we can make it,
I feel like above the mullion, you should have, it should have a consistent expression across the top.
Okay.
Maybe a translucent panel, and then infill panels where you indicate the signage.
I like that idea, we can do that.
It'll give you a spandrel.
Yeah.
The last thing I just want to go over, if we can just go to the lobby, a lot of questions came up about the storage in there, and I just want to identify those rooms in your plan.
The floor plan you want me to bring up?
Yeah, just bring up that first floor so we can show that.
There you go.
There we go. That's what I want.
Yeah.
What we're looking at on the screen right now is the lobby area when you enter into the building, correct?
Yes.
And there are a number of things I would see when you enter into the lobby. To the left is the meeting room, am I correct?
Yes.
And then you have the elevator, then past that to the left, correct?
Yes.
You have a bank of mailboxes on the right, am I correct? And
Yes.
what are the other 2 rooms?
The other 2 room is the, let's see, that was, make sure I call it laundry room. Is the laundry room, well, the laundry room.
Provided for the tenants in the building?
For the tenants, yeah.
And then the other room behind that is?
That's the trash room.
Okay.
And again, it's situated in a fashion that will allow, them to be taken out from that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And as an architect, when you design these things, you take into account the amount of apartment units that would be generating trash, am I correct?
Yes.
Would that room then at 115 square feet be sufficient to handle the trash that is produced, both the recycling and the regular trash, by the 24 apartment units?
Yes. Especially since we also have a building, maintenance person that,
A super
super similar to what we are doing in 700 banks.
That's all the questions I have this week.
Okay. Anything from the board?
Yes. Well, Obi, I think you did a great job, continuing the 700 bank design and making the Main Street frontage a little better. But I have 2 kind of big concerns with the architecture, the way that the building is laid out.
Yeah.
The first is the penthouses. While I agree that you're complying with the letter of the law in terms of the penthouses, I think the spirit of the law is a little broken because there's a request to do a variance for a setback of the penthouses. And the reason the setback requirement was there was because we didn't want to make it, I believe that the city didn't want to make it appear as if there was another story. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of how it feels on this building, is that, on the proposed building, is that it feels like a fifth story there, because those penthouses are so close to the building facade and take up a large portion of the facades on the Bangs Ave and the Main Street sides. So I guess my question is, and it seems to be technically feasible, but maybe I'm missing something. Is there any reason that we couldn't swap, or the design couldn't be changed such that the staircases to the penthouse actually flow in the opposite direction, and then the penthouses get moved back closer to the center of the building.
It is, I mean, yeah.
You want us to let it sworn in? Nothing at all.
Yeah, do you want to address that? Yeah, we're gonna have, after we're done,
Okay.
Obi, we'll have, Mr. Sackman will talk about that, and we'll talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. From my perspective, I think that might solve the problem and make it feel less like a floor. Otherwise, I would be, in favor of just removing the penthouses altogether. The second big concern I have, and this may be, I don't know, is the corner element, the corner treatment of this building. Main Street and Bangs is kind of a prominent intersection in the city, and I think if we're going to have a development here, we should definitely get it right, that corner that's going to be so visible. My question is, can those corner units potentially be laid out in a different way whereby you swap the living and kitchen space and the bedroom space so that you get more fenestration on that Bangs Ave facing facade? Because the way it looks now, it just looks, it's the one portion of the facade that is different from the rest, and it's like on the most prominent corner. So to me, it's a little problematic. But
Which one? I can ask you to clarify. You're specifically concerned about the Bangs Avenue facing.
the Bangs Avenue facing of the corner, it has these two smaller windows where, almost by nature of the consistency of the design, you'd want it to be those bigger Juliet type windows, right, Eric? I mean, I think.
Well, yeah, I believe this was a point of discussion when we reviewed this at the design review committee.
Yeah.
And we did make some suggestions, which I do tend to agree that there is an inconsistency between the Main Street and the Bangs Avenue facades. I don't think that inconsistency in and of itself is a bad thing.
No, I don't either.
However, here I tend to agree with you that the change between the two doesn't have a great relationship.
Yeah, I think just from my perspective, I think that corner is so important to the visual appeal of, especially along Main Street, and I just think it could use a little more
What
thought.
we're talking about is if we change the two and just put one with the Juliet facade in a line coming up and down.
However, I believe Obi has done something wise here by providing a double hung window with a higher sill height. You can put a bed below the window. Otherwise, your
Gotcha.
bed is backed up against a low
gotcha.
window. So
It's
I
a
do
trade-off
agree
of
that.
livability and.
Yeah.
Right,
didn't
so
think of that.
I think the solution is to gang your double hung windows
Okay.
together to create a
Really
consistent
nice.
mass,
Yeah.
but still provide the high sill height for a bed to fit below the sill.
That would be a good
Okay.
solution. Yes.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Mike, but when I have a pet peeve that when you have a whole wall of windows facing the street, and I look in the window and I see the back of your couch, right?
Yeah, no,
So it's the same thing in the bedroom.
Yeah, and I'm not an architect, and I apologize that
Yeah, no, it's.
I wasn't privy to the design committee meeting. I just feel like it just feels like it's lacking a little bit on that
Right.
corner.
I tend to agree that facade needs a little rethinking, but I think we should let Obi and Mr. Sackman go away and come back with a solution
Yeah.
rather than over-dictate.
Oh, agreed. I have a couple more questions that maybe might be a little easier. Is there a way to introduce any fenestration next to the lobby door, even if it's like a frosted glass or a, I know it's a laundry room and a meter room, but maybe there's an opportunity to kind of break that wall a little bit. I don't know.
Which wall was it?
Next to the lobby door on either side.
I think it frames the entrance, right?
Okay.
Because we have the solid and then we have, I don't know if I can go to this. It kind of, in my opinion, frames we can easily introduce glass in the laundry area
you know, again, I'm not an architect,
But
but
then, but then we have the meter room on the other side of it. Huh?
what's that? Sorry.
You really want, glass right in front of the
I just think,
I think there were other options.
so it'll get to one of my next points is that I think along the Bangs Ave, you know, there's been built a nice retail corridor along Bangs Ave, and I think by putting a parking garage on the first floor, it kind of kills that vibe, and I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, we could introduce maybe some more glass to break up that blank wall. It might help just with the pedestrian experience.
Do you mean just by the lobby? Is that where you're suggesting?
Yeah, like right next to the lobby door. on
Right,
either
so
side.
that's where you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know the rest of the board could disagree, but okay. Another minor point along the Main Street facade, same thing, fenestration. Can we bring the glass? Was there a reason why we brought the wall right here? Why it's a solid wall and not just continued glass there?
This corner here. This corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, why is not glass? Let me look at the elevation.
Oh, on the depiction, it does look like it is, like on the first,
Yeah, I think it.
on page 1, T1, it looks like it is.
I changed that from what was the original
I-
design.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you look at the elevation,
Is that a door coming out there?
There's a door on the stairs at the end of the.
could you bring up the Main Street elevation maybe?
Yeah, let me go to the elevation.
Page 7.
This,
Down a little bit.
this sheet will be,
So
this one.
it feels like the glass wants to end midway between the set of windows, or sorry, midway between the windows and the gray, where the
Yeah,
gray
it's
facade
not-
starts.
Carrying the bay.
It seems like you want one
The
more
storefront.
bay, but I
Yeah.
could be wrong too.
Where?
So the last,
So
the bay between
this
the.
space here,
Is
like if you had one more
is that part of the
transom
staircase?
window, I don't
Go
know.
to page 4.
Yeah. Or make that
Pull it over.
accent,
Yeah.
Well, it's a.
you know,
Yeah,
bump
It's already
it or change
On
the.
page 4, you can see it
We
in the
can
back.
do that, but the only thing that we were trying to carry that wall down.
Oh, okay.
Again, we can create.
Yeah, it's
different
competing
in this
with
area,
the door.
And then the rest of.
Right.
Yeah.
first floor. So,
again, these are just suggestions. I'm not an architect, but it's just things I thought about. So the last thing, I mean, you know, obviously I'm very sensitive to the amount of parking that can be provided on site, and I don't want to in any way lessen that. But again, going back to the point about the garage along Bangs Avenue, I feel like this project would be better served by having a little more retail space along Bangs Ave, and it would result, you know, it could result in the loss of parking inside, but maybe there's another way to accommodate additional parking, whether it's subsurface stack or something to make up for it. But I do feel like, you know, one of the variances is the commercial space, and if that retail just wrapped a little further down Bangs from where it currently ends, it would just feel a little more complete from a pedestrian experience, in that, you know, so close to Main Street, you have this blank wall that starts. But obviously it's a trade-off, right? I mean, you'd lose parking.
yeah, it's a good point you make, but the only thing I will say is on 700 banks, we have ample, you know, retail on that whole first floor.
Right.
So do we, I mean, if I'm, as a business owner myself,
Sure.
I'll be curious to, I don't think I would want to increase competition, you know, in the same area where I am.
Sure.
So do we, you know, this provides the opportunity for us to have, you know, retail all along 700, which is what we have now, and then there's a break.
Right.
You know, and then when you wrap the corner, then that's where you have the other, you know, retail on Main Street. Because once you tamper with this here, you know, the parking. And that's
Yeah,
the reason
and
why we.
Total, you know, I'm,
Mr. Sackman is going to testify, he'll be able to provide,
Okay.
having developed in the downtown, familiar with, obviously commercial and
Yep.
residential parking. He'll provide additional testimony in terms of his thoughts on the design and why.
yeah. Again, very sensitive to the need for parking, but, want to make the best pedestrian experience possible. Last point, real small. Is the intent to definitely put the building name, street address on the Bangs Ave?
That was gonna be my question.
Yeah, because
You're gonna have
it's not 316 Bangs Ave.
Change it to 744.
Yeah. Or put the 316 on the front. I don't know. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you for picking that up.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
People are gonna be walking down.
They're going to be looking for 316.
I'm on the 300 block of tags, but
Yeah.
I'm lost, so yeah, pick a nice 700 number.
74 bags or
So if I could,
Yeah.
so if I could just sort of add or just add my own thoughts to the issue of the blank facade. So if I'm correct, this will be the only non-retail space in that entire block of Bangs Ave, right? All the other side, plus the existing building you're adjoining to, and the corner space are all retail. Is that correct? Or
I don't know if that's entirely true, but
Well, I don't know that it's all retail, but
it's all
it's
commercial space
commercial space.
on the ground floor? Oh, there's the
No,
there's
yeah,
the
Mercury
gallery,
has-
you
yeah.
have the state building, you have the parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to, it would be really helpful to see a kind of area map, but I guess you provided that with your engineering testimony. So in terms of, I understand why you want to have parking there. I think my concern is actually about the treatment of that grill in some way that provides visual interest along the facade is another avenue for creating a visual interest. And I believe when we spoke in the design review committee, we talked about carrying some of the striping down to ground level to create a rhythm. Now, I'm not suggesting that's what needs to happen, but some lighting plan or I just find the grill work to be a little, I don't want to use a pejorative word by calling it simple, because I don't think simple is bad. But, something that provides a little more visual interest along the facade to, kind of tie the existing building to the retail on the corner for that pedestrian zone. I don't know what the solution is, but I do think Mike has a point about how that chunk separates the existing retail from the corner retail.
I just have one more corner comment, because when I first saw the project and I saw this graphic image, I just had thought that the corner of the retail was just going to be a door there because of that corner being an important area, and I was trying to think of ways to kind of activate that corner. Once I realized the door was over to this, on the Main Street side, I did not come up with anything, but I felt like that is an important corner that I wanted to have something more happening on the corner itself. I think it ties into the wrapping of the retail, but I don't know if there's anything more that could be done to make that more of a inviting space on the.
I think your corner bay is where the column comes down.
I see the column there.
Yeah, so it would have to be on it could be about removing the knee wall on
That's exactly what we just said.
yeah,
remove the
you
knee
could
wall.
remove the knee wall on the Bangs Avenue side as well. You'll still have a knee wall on the corner
Corner, yeah.
because the column is there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That would help.
Okay.
And it gives you flexibility if
Yeah.
somebody wants to have their entrance on Bangs
And
rather
that
than.
banks, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
We're,
that's,
that's
Anybody else from the planning board? Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments and questions.
Go ahead.
Let's stay right with the corner that we're talking about right now. The UEZ design guidelines indicate that your facades are to take into account what it's adjacent to and what's in the area. And you're trying to, not to match it necessarily, but to make it compatible. Now, you've got a very modern design on this corner, and right across the street on Bangs Avenue, the northeast corner of Bangs and Main, you've got a building that has a what I call a terracotta, a green terracotta tile on it. South of this building, you've got the Santander Bank, which is certainly not a modern building. And across the street, you've got a post office. And none of these buildings on Main Street are architecturally compatible with what you're showing here. And that is one of the provisions of the UEZ design guidelines. It's also part of the master plan. And while this may be great at some other location, I don't think it's really appropriate here. You have, you're continuing along Bangs Avenue with something compatible with the 700 Bangs Avenue building. But when you get to the corner and around onto Main Street, it certainly is not compatible with anything on Main Street. And I really think that that needs to be looked at. Also, I have some questions on the south side. You have a balcony on the south side of this building.
Yes.
And yet you show on your drawing that this is going to be covered with a new building at some future time. I realize it's not your problem at the moment, but what happens when somebody goes to build on Madison and you've got these balconies? How is that going to work?
Actually, it's the same developer, and Madison is way, further out. Remember now, some of the banks is much deeper than this building in terms of the depth of it, so like 60-something feet deep. Madison happens behind that. So there's quite a separation between the two in terms of,
Can you show A31 while you're talking about this?
And on your drawings,
A31 shows your section, drawing one.
A31.
Yeah. So Jim, to your point, it's actually next, this whole building is next to the Santander, so it's not exposed. You're correct that the balcony faces the Santander.
Yeah.
building.
yes, they
Yeah.
do, but they don't face the Santander. They're east of the Santander.
The balconies face the Santander.
Side of it.
Right.
This is the side of it.
So the balconies are
The next one
facing
down.
a blank wall?
That's correct. Go down one, in this,
All of them?
it's only on one floor.
Yeah, just
Right there.
See,
So those, all
Yeah,
all 6 of those,
They're effectively interior.
Yeah.
There's a drawing on sheet
they're
A31.
interior balconies.
Okay, that's when you have urban development of properties that take up the entire site. Is that common to have if you're gonna provide a balcony? That's not uncommon.
Yeah, it's not.
Can't touch the screen there.
So this drawing here
Yes.
shows you, this is the balcony, this is the Santander,
Yeah.
and these are the top floors. So it's a light well down to one floor of balconies only.
Right.
Right.
I certainly wouldn't want to pass that comment. You have on the roof, you have a penthouse where the requirement is a 20-foot setback, and you propose 5. That's already been discussed to some degree. But You have room on the roof, and you could move that penthouse back.
Mr. Sackler's going to address that when he comes. Mr. Sackler's going to address that.
In your trash room, you have a 115 square foot room. And the requirements, by my calculations, are 288 square feet. You're quite a bit under. You need a, on page 13, where it says that you're to provide 12 square foot per dwelling unit. 4.6A. That comes out to 288 square feet, where you're providing 115.
15 years.
Well, based upon your experience, what is being provided, does that satisfy the requirements of the units for this building?
Yeah, I believe this space should be enough to handle the number of units that we have, especially since we have the building supervisor that will be able to manage the trash.
And as far as the colors go, again, the guidelines indicate what the writers of the UEZ, I believe these are UEZ design guidelines, and again, that's being ignored. And it's also the same situation with the windows.
Donna, can you provide some clarity about what the design guidelines state for this particular property?
Well, the design guidelines are crafted with the intent to guide development to be more compatible with the more historic architectural elements that exist in the CBD, particularly in the historic district portion.
Right. Now, does this lie in that historic district? And I'm sorry, may I step back? So what?
It does apply to all.
What guidelines, is this the Main Street redevelopment?
No.
Plan?
CBD plan.
The CBD plan,
Yeah.
okay. So the urban enterprise zone is the CBD plan, like that's what Jim is referring to.
Well, the UEZ is attached to the CBD
Right.
redevelopment plan, and a lot of it talks about renovating historical buildings. It provides, the way I read, a lot of flexibility in terms of new buildings, in contrast to the renovation and rehabilitation of historical buildings. So with regard to new buildings, it doesn't dictate that it has to have traditional design. When I say traditional, it should meet its period, my word. So I don't necessarily agree that modern design is prohibited within the downtown. In fact, I think the flexibility of the UEZ provides for it, seeing it's a new building. And that's why 700 Bank is approved, that exact reason.
That goes back to my original question concerning the compatibility of the Main Street facade with the other buildings on Main Street. And if that facade is compatible, then the colors should be compatible as well.
Well, when you look at the modern building today, is not going to be a building that was built in the 1940s or 1950s or 1920s. Every period has its own design. And, I looked at the proposal to redevelop the municipal area. And a lot of what was in that, or that request that went out. And it's modern when you look at that. They're not looking to do anything historic. You have certain historic buildings, certainly, but we're in a modern era, and today's designs are not historic. Certainly you can pick up certain compatible elements from historic buildings to try to include that in there. And you can do that a lot of times when you're building up on top of historic buildings. When you're building from ground up, the UEZ, the way I read, especially Main Street, I mean, you're trying to update it. You're trying to modernize it.
I disagree, Andy. I'm looking at the purpose right in front of me because I wanted to make sure. So again, right off the bat, handbook has been prepared to assist property owners and businesses in improving the exteriors of their buildings. There is the Facade Improvement Grant Program, which provides improvement and rehab assistance to businesses located within the UEZ zone. These design guidelines establish criteria for those planning new buildings, facade improvements, storefront renovations, signage, and outdoor displays.
Right.
So it's a guideline that establishes criteria for new buildings.
There are guidelines in there for buildings, but when they talk a lot in there about maintaining historical design, it's the historical buildings, when you read through that, in terms of maintaining the design. It does not limit new buildings to historical design. Nowhere in there does it do that.
And I guess I would also take the position that the contextualization of contemporary design happens through massing, height, relationships to existing buildings. And I do agree that you don't have, like, it shouldn't have a dental molding cornice and, the punched windows, and that's not what contemporary design does, and it also doesn't conform to most environmental standards.
Keep going.
I do think that you can design a contemporary building that is harmonious with its surroundings without mimicking historical design. And I do think I will stick out here and say that I do think you have been largely successful in designing a contextually appropriate building. There are some things that have been discussed that we have requested. But, and Mr. Henry has his points as well. But I do think that we shouldn't be looking for a replica of a 1920s bank. No, I'm not suggesting that's what you are asking for. But, I do think that you have matched the building next to it, which is, and if you look across the street, the context of the municipal building provides no relationship. So you can say, oh, there's a historic building here and there's a historic building here. Well, there's two entire blocks of Main Street.
And Sammy's right next to the bank.
Exactly.
Is, I don't want to say it's a throwaway design.
No.
It relates to the rest of the streetscape.
But that was a renovation, right?
Right, but even the building itself is a simple modern box, right?
Yeah, agreed. And, right, so I think that we can, we have to be careful about cherry picking what the context is, because the context is not consistent. And we can.
So I want to ask you, no, I changed my mind.
Does anybody else have anybody else on the board have anything?
I just had a question. We hadn't talked at all about efforts towards sustainable design, and I wanted to ask what components or elements were incorporated towards that end, if any.
I guess, in terms of the mechanical systems that we're going to be using for the building, materials and, baseline information. The developer, we've not taken the step to say it has to be LEED building or things like that, but based on where the current codes are going, everything is, lending itself towards sustainability and efficiency, and we're going to be employing those elements into the building. The materials that we select, will reflect that. But there's no overt effort to say, okay, we're going to make it a LEED, whatever building, because there's cost associated with it. So, but it to be an energy efficient building, meet all the codes and what is required.
Any other board member have any other concerns for the architect?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Two things. The portions of the building that encroach into the right of way, you pointed them out in plan view. One of them was by the entrance, I believe, along Banks. And I think that's a canopy, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. The portion at the corner of Bangs and Main, the plans say building above. Is that the entire 3 stories going up?
Yes, that's that portion of it. If you look at A1.1, it shows it dashed. It carries that all the way up.
So you've already mentioned that you'll go to mayor and council and seek approval to be able to do that. What I wanted to mention is that also needs to be part of the DOT application since you're encroaching into the DOT right. Correct.
Mm. Anything else from our professionals?
May I ask?
Go.
That corner, with the gray and bounded by the white, right on the corner of Bangs, that actually sticks out, correct? At each end, it indents into the building, and that's what you're referring to as the encroachment into both the Main Street state right-of-way, city right-of-way, and then the Bangs right-of-way.
No, just the Main Street portion of it. This building here is
Right.
where it comes out.
That
This
sticks
portion-
out? Okay.
Yeah, this portion is within
Flush?
where it should be, yes.
Okay, I get it. I just wanted to understand, because I couldn't get the depth.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected.
I can't get the
Yes,
depth of looking.
yeah, it comes out.
Okay,
within
so
the
that
background, yeah.
side to the left, the
Yes,
side,
to the
facade to the
right.
left, facade
Yes.
to the right,
Yes.
they actually come out. Okay,
Yes.
I get it, because I'm not getting the depth from that photo.
Yeah, the one on the left is very
Okay,
much
no,
sharp
I
and smaller.
understand. I'm good.
than the other one.
Now I get it. Thank you.
I just have one thing that on one of the renderings on A-3.1, where we're seeing between the two buildings, the 700 and this one, is there really access through those doors to go to the next building? Because it looks like you have 3 doors. Right above the garage.
Emergency stairs.
Sorry?
I believe that's the emergency stairs.
Those are emergency stairs, but do they go to the next building?
Yeah.
All right, so
That's an egress.
That's the stair, egress stair.
So that is an egress stair that you're allowing people to go from building to building
Yes.
freely? Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Anything else? Okay, then can we open it to any questions from the public to the architect? Anything? We're good?
Lastly, Mr. Saxon provides some additional testimony.
Okay.
Carter, please raise your right hand. Solemnly swear testimony about giving this matter the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record and spell it. You can put your hand down.
Carter, C-A-R-T-E-R, Sackman, S-A-C-K-M-A-N.
Thank you.
Mr. Saxon, can you please tell us your affiliation with the entity 316 Main Street LLC?
I am a principal of the applicant.
And you're familiar with this application?
Yes.
And can you provide some clarification with regard to the design elements that have been discussed tonight, like penthouse and also?
Yes, I would just like to just touch base on the facade just for a second. And because I understand that architecturally, everybody has a different view and it's very subjective. I personally love 700 Banks, kind of how that was created. And just to be clear, if you and you could probably Google map it, if you look at the corner of Bond and Bangs, where 700 Bangs hits Bond and Bangs, you'll see on the Bangs Avenue elevation an element not too dissimilar from the corner you're seeing here at Main and Bangs, where you have, we did a variation of the window line. Instead of a repetition that constantly went through the whole streetscape between Bond and Main Street, it was broken up. It was done with some thought. I just want to be clear on that. So you do have a different element, as you see, the small windows and what have you, but it's something that's very similar if you see it on there. And listen, I get it's very subjective. I thought it went well and it was repeated. And so that was really part of the thought behind that. I'm a big believer that, you know, some contrast with some older architectural periods can be good. It can more or less that have a positive impact on an older architectural design because it becomes more of a focal point. So, you know, that's another thing when you talk about the Santander and how that plays out. I will say, I'm going to jump around a little. We have a bunch of different projects in the CBD. You can take a look at some contrast, some, for example, at 550 Cookman, we added a third story. It's set back about 5 or 6 feet. We basically colored it the same. We lost it into the sky. And so many people have come and said, hey, I can't believe you put another floor on that. Don't even notice it. But it got lost. And that was a very shallow one. I think probably we could push it back a little. What we try to maintain on the roof, just so you know, and this is a site that is a little more shallow, so when we utilize the 20% on the pop-ups, the duplex penthouse units, we do try to put our condensed units between the two bulkheads and then create deck space on the perimeter looking out. That just seemed like a better utilization of space. That was the motivation behind it. I think when you really look at the floor plan, I know the architect colored the whole area, but intermittent in there is really deck space and bulkhead. So it's not this long line of structure that you see on the front streetscape. So it would be broken up. I just wanted to be clear if somebody picks that up. But I think Mike brought up the point where could we flip some of that on the backside? Probably yes. I was looking at it, we were looking at it earlier. I could probably knock it back like, 7 or 8 feet comfortably and still work the design. So that I think can be done. Parking wise, I know it was testified earlier just about structurally, 700 Bangs has tight spaces on the lower level. It works fine, it's been working fine. I would make a recommendation if you guys wanted to see what kind of element. I understand the concern about the ground floor retail and what that looks like with a garage. Across the street, we do have one on Mercury. I've always wondered, what if you give me a little, we can put a little greenway and do a little vine if I had like 18 inches off the front facade and the sidewalk. That might be something positive we could do so that, and obviously we have a little residential area, that would be nice if we could do something like that. Personally, Mike, I'm not a big fan of more glass on either side of the entryway. I like the idea that we use this right number and we use the brick as a kind of like there just because we have some facade. I think that would be nice. And then we do, just from the garbage, I know it was brought up, but garbage is an issue as far as operating a building, and certainly we don't want that to happen, but we will have full service superintendents. And so those areas the garbage will go out regularly and serviced regularly. So we have we have 42 units next door in 700 Bangs. And the garbage room is just about, it's a little less than double this size with 24 units. So that was kind of the theory that went behind sizing it. But we're taking garbage out, I think, twice a week is if we do municipal garbage pickup. So that was the thought behind it. We don't have really heavy, we'll have our commercial tenant deal with their own garbage. within the space as well. And the idea with the retail, by the way, guys, is just from the marketing standpoint, when this was contemplated and the pro forma on this, retail is a little harder for us to move. It just is. And so hence the shallow works out pretty well because more people can afford it. And we thought it was super important on Main Street to have activated retail. So that we tried to stay true to. And the shallow actually works because we felt we could maintain a tenant base there and not have vacant space. So those are some of my thoughts. And just one thought with trees, I know it was brought up earlier, but like tree guards, the only reason I say tree guards, I'm all for like the tree pit and the size of it for health of a tree. But we have a lot of trees dying in the CBD. And I think a lot of it has to do with this heavy activity. There's a lot of retail activity. There's a lot of people bringing dogs and everything. I just think it has somewhat of an impact on some of the trees. If I just noticed just walking down to the trees that have tree guards, some tenants put in heavy wood barriers. I don't particularly like them, but they've protected the trees in some cases on heavy thoroughfare. I'll say that. So like all my thoughts, if anybody has any questions.
Well, I think that, I know that for me also was one of the biggest concerns was that we only have 5 feet versus the 20. And what we see from both Main and on Bangs, it's just,
Yeah, we can take a look
you
at that. I
can
think
push
we can
those
flip
back,
that.
see
I
what we
think
can
flip
do
that.
Yeah.
to make that more workable.
Yeah, and for me also, I think on 700 Bangs, they were pushed back. So there was an image in our packet, I think, of a top view of the roof, and it just looked funny that the ones on 316 Main were so close and the ones on 700 were so far back. If it could,
700 is a wider lot.
Right.
Let's take a look at, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think we can do it, Mike. I
Okay.
really do. Looking at it, I think it's actually a better design overall, actually, if it's pushed in
back
towards the center.
Cool.
All right, do any of the planning board members have any other questions of Mr. Sackman? Any of our professionals? Go ahead.
I understand you may not be prepared for this question, but,
You're gonna ask it.
yeah. Well, because we're talking about the parking spaces and how, and the trade-off between the utility of the streetscape and the vitality of the business corridor on Bangs. And you're already making a contribution for off-site parking. So what is the cost to build those parking spaces in the building? I mean, taking into account, you need the door for the fire rating, you need this light system. Is it really, cheaper than the $15,000 contribution per space? And I don't know, it's a rhetorical question. And then adding to that, there's nothing that says it has to be retail on the ground floor. We want activated streetscape, or I'm using the wrong word because it's inside the building, it's not in the street. But, it could be space that's common to the tenants. So maybe it's a rec room or a fitness center or some other type of lounge or something that gives you, again, this view from the street of activity and engagement, even though it's not necessarily a business enterprise where people could come in. But it's not a blank wall, it's not dead space, it's not exhaust from the parking structure. So what is really the fiscal constraint? Is there a fiscal constraint to that necessarily?
Well, I'll just say, so the parking at 1.5, we have 42 units at 700 Banks. We have approximately 60 spaces. Just from a practical standpoint, I want every one of my tenants to be able to have a car and park where they live and not go running around. And so the reality is 1.5 spaces I've found in this district is too many for zoning.
Okay.
For residential. So I have extras. So these spaces become important to me because it frames out what I think is a marketable, available parking requirement, regardless of what the city says. It's just practically, I'll probably have between the two buildings, I'll need those spaces so that I can accommodate my tenant base. So when they lease from me, they actually have a space in the building, even though I'm short under the zoning requirement.
Okay, so let me just also understand better. So are you indicating that you sort of have more spaces at 700 Bangs, and so you may actually sort of spread the wealth between all of the apartments, all the residents between the two buildings?
My goal will be that the residents have at least one opportunity to rent at least one space.
Right now, under the code, you can't do that. You can't share parking. I'm hoping at some point, the CBD becomes amended whereby you can have shared parking if not everybody's using it, so you don't have empty space. It's continuing to discuss with the city to accommodate that. Because realistically, if you have a one-bedroom apartment in today's world, you don't need one that has space, you need one. But unfortunately, listen, it's something that we see all over the place, especially in the state of New Jersey, that your parking requirements have not kept up. They haven't been updated, God knows how many years, with how people utilize cars.
Agreed, particularly in the urban environment.
Exactly.
I mean, we're, train stations right here.
You got it. So I'm hoping at some point the city updates allows that if you don't utilize all that, you can have shared parking, provide more parking instead of empty space. But right now, this provides 19 spaces for 24 units. 5 units would not have parking realistically with one bedroom. So that's for the most part what you're going to find. So you're better off providing parking to your tenants as opposed to them driving around taking parking spaces in the street. That's what we've done.
So
it impacts not having spaces for the tenants. It impacts, the
marketability of the units.
marketability of the
Sure.
unit.
But so are you, there was testimony earlier that the spaces are going to be assigned. It's obviously not one per because there aren't enough. I don't want to get your client in trouble, but is there the idea that you may be able to?
Hopefully someday in the future.
Someday. We can have the current ordinance, hopefully at some point.
Where is the ordinance located, in what section of the code?
Well, it's the redevelopment plan, which would be a design exception.
We can't grant a design exception from it?
It would seem like it's
I think
any other.
I don't know, I don't, you look at the plan much more than I do, and certainly Donna does.
You need a plan amendment. We had a hearing here with all the retailers and everything about doing that plan amendment, I think when Michael Capabianco was city
Just trying to
manager.
see if there was a back door, but I guess, okay, I get it, okay.
Anything else? Anyone else?
It would be a variance. It's in the requirements in the CBD.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions? Anyone from the public have any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll be scheduling for you to come back, and
Our next available is October 18th.
all right, so October 18th. So we will be bringing back both 316 Main and 700 Bangs, because we didn't get to 700 Bangs, correct?
Well,
It's kind of part and parcel.
It's all being.
But on the agenda, it'll be together anyway, right?
Yes, absolutely. yes.
Okay. All right, can I get a motion?
Madam
Yes.
Chairwoman, May, why don't we make sure we understand what the applicant might be coming back with?
Sure.
So that the board's concerns are addressed.
Sure.
I have it that they're going to revisit those penthouse setbacks.
Yes.
See if they can push them back a little further. I know there was a comment by Eric about I'm probably going to screw it up, but the sign band on Main Street, you're going to do something about making that a better design. So whatever that is. I don't know that I have any other.
I do.
I have
We
quite a
have-
few.
I have the corner facade,
Yes, that, okay.
entry way to see whether or not we can add glass or do something, fenestration on that. Detail to the garage grills, and the knee wall for the retail on bangs. Get rid of that to allow for
Mhm. We also have the, is that what you have?
That's what I have.
Okay, we also have the analysis for the northwest, was it northwest most lot?
Parking space,
Parking
yeah.
space. You're also going to provide us with a staging plan.
sorry,
Wheel
what?
stops,
Construction staging.
construction staging. We were talking about wheel stops, just to,
We'll just.
because that'll be something that'll be in one of that. The trees were going to be put into the maintenance guarantee. I have also, there was signage. Eric had mentioned something about signage, and that you have that. North design, the fenestration by the lobby, we already covered that. I think that's what I have.
The accessible parking space.
Can I add something for consideration?
The north, that northwest
Well-
space.
No, addressing the,
Oh, addressing it, whether or not we're going to
Yeah.
move it, or if it's going to
Right.
stay where it is, because we have to find a resolution for that,
right.
because that's code.
Mhm.
You're right.
Barbara, can I
Go for it.
ask for consideration,
Yes.
the EV-ready parking spaces? I did look it up, and the ordinance was not yet in place. It'd be 15% of required parking. So if it was what's being provided, it would be 3 spaces. And it's EV-ready is just meaning there's electrical infrastructure in the garage that would allow you to have electric vehicle parking.
We could provide that.
So that's, most buildings.
That's not a problem.
Okay, so we have EV ready also. Okay.
Got it.
And were you also going to look at the entry door on Main Street at the south end?
That van coming down?
Yeah.
I just really like, I kind of like that. Nobody likes that. I mean, that's like, it's subjective. I don't really care. I'll do it either way.
Was it, did we include that, removing the knee wall? Was that
Yeah.
part of that? That was part of that also?
Thanks. Right.
Okay.
So we need assuming we're done with what we're looking for, you would need a motion for a date, time, and place certain?
Yes, we need a motion for, what was that, October 18th, without further notice,
7 PM in this room.
7 PM in this room.
Motion.
And Mr. Karas, will you waive any time within which the board has to act under the MOU for the reconsideration? Thank you. very
Motion to
much.
carry the application to October 18th. Without further notice.
I have a motion by Michael Manzella and a second by Eric Gallipo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Application carried to October 18th, 2021.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you,
All right,
everyone.
thank you.
Then can we get a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right,
Who was second? I'm sorry.
Jim.
Mr. Henry.
Okay,
Night, everybody.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
I didn't want to say it and change the 3.